Chapter 953. Listening to the song, Zhang Ling trembled with anger. If it weren't for the fact that she knew that she couldn't beat him in the divine tribulation, she wouldn't have dared to attack him. Cao Zhang Lufang listened to the revised lyrics with a strange expression on her face. She looked like she wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. When she heard the male student sing the most IG part, she finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She turned around and her shoulders kept shaking. The Taoist priests waited for the male student, who had randomly changed the lyrics, to finish singing. Only then did they heave a sigh of relief. But before they could relax, they heard a girl come on stage and sing a song about the Tibetan plateau. Fortunately, the lyrics were not tampered with this time, but when she sang the most resounding part, Zhang Ling and the other Taoists were so moved that they wanted to poke their ears deaf. This was not singing, it was clearly killing chickens and ducks. F***CK sister, don't force yourself to sing if you can't sing it. You will break your voice, do you know that? What? My voice has already broken? Can you sing a song with a lower pitch? People should act according to their abilities. Damn, she really changed it. What? Tears in prison? Can you sing something more bitter? Oh my God, sister. Continue singing the Tibetan plateau. I want to cry when I hear it. The students at the foot of the mountain were crying, and the Taoists on the mountain couldn't stand it anymore. After a while, a person appeared next to Zhang Ling. Zhang Ling looked at him and saw that it was Zhang Kongyun. She saw that Zhang Kongyun was surrounded by golden light, and his aura was much stronger than before. Obviously, he had reached the Thunder Retribution realm. Zhang Ling was stunned, and then she was delighted. She said in a loud voice, "Junior brother Kongyun, congratulations. You've finally broken through to the Thunder Retribution realm." When the other Taoists saw this, they all came up to congratulate him. Zhang Lufang also jumped in front of him happily, took his arm and said, "Master, you've finally broken through to the Thunder Retribution realm. You're amazing." Zhang Kongyun said angrily, "What are you congratulating me for? Where did this bastard come from, howling like a ghost and howling like a wolf? If it weren't for these bastards crying at the top of their lungs, I would have broken through to the third level of the Thunder Retribution realm. Now I've only broken through to the second level." When the crowd heard this, they became angry again and shouted, "Bastard, you actually made Uncle Kongyun's cultivation stagnate. Damn it!" In a year, this was the most important period. If one wanted to break through to the Lightning Retribution realm, almost all cultivators would do it at this time. Moreover, if someone in a sect wanted to break through to the Lightning Retribution realm at this time, it would be a big event for the sect. If someone tried to stop or destroy it, it would be equivalent to cutting off one's source of wealth and obstructing one's career. Cultivators always looked forward to the day when they could cultivate to immortality. It was not easy for a year to compare to a few days. It was not easy for them to seize the opportunity to break through several stages of thunder tribulations in one go, but they were interrupted by this group of bastards. It was really infuriating. These Taoists clamored to go down the mountain to find trouble with these students, but soon someone pointed out that these students were backed by Li Wudi. What could they do to Li Wudi? When everyone thought of this, they became a little dispirited and gave up. In this day and age, although a strong fist might not necessarily be able to travel around the world, sometimes a strong fist had its own benefits. With a strong fist, the voice of others was also strong. At this time, there was also a Taoist priest who suggested that if these guys at the foot of the mountain could shout, why couldn't they shout? Everyone shouted together and see who could outshout who. There were many Taoist priests who were touched by good intentions, and they immediately agreed. At this time, Zhang Lufang also became excited. She had always been a person who liked to join in the fun, and she was afraid that the world would be stable. She also waved her arms excitedly and said loudly, "Yes, yes, let's shout together. I don't believe that we cultivators can't outshout those loudspeakers." As soon as she finished speaking, Zhang Kongyun knocked her on the head, causing her to cry out in pain. She covered her head and looked back at Zhang Kongyun with an aggrieved expression. "Master, why did you hit me?" But at this time, Zhang Kongyun was still calm. After asking about the situation, he first glared at Zhang Lufang, and then said loudly, "Xixiang, Shimmy, don't be impatient. If we go to make trouble for them, we will really fall into Li Jiandong's trap." At this time, everyone calmed down a little and asked, "Shu Kongyun, what should we do?" Zhang Kongyun thought for a moment and said helplessly, "The calmer we should show, the more disappointed they will be. If we make trouble for a while, Li Jiandong will find that it's useless, and he will retreat by himself. Zhang Lufeng, who was standing to one side, said boldly, "Will he retreat so easily?" She didn't believe that Li Jiandong would give up the plan to save Zi Yuan so easily. Zhang Kongyun said, "Zhenren Li has great determination and wisdom. It's almost impossible for him to abandon the plan to save Zi Yuan. But if he continues to make trouble here, he will definitely spend a lot of money every day. Li Jiandong will definitely not be able to hold on for long. Especially when he finds that it's useless, he will definitely retreat. Of course, I'm not talking about abandoning the rescue, but he should abandon this style." When the people around heard this, they felt much more at ease. They would rather have a real fight with Li Jiandong than suffer such torment. Zhang Ling couldn't help nodding in appreciation. Hearing this, Zhang Ling couldn't help but nod her head in appreciation. That's right, junior brother Kong Yun is right. Everyone should go back. As I said, let him be strong, let him be strong, the cool breeze caresses the hill. No matter how many times these words were said, they all felt that it was appropriate. Everyone nodded, and someone immediately praised, "Uncle Da and Uncle Kong Yun are right. It's our willpower that's too shallow." Zhang Ling smiled and was about to nod in relief when she heard a voice coming from the foot of the mountain. This voice belonged to the host who had said so many things before. This time, the abbot said in a clear voice, "Next, Senior Li Jiandong has specially ordered a song for us. It will be sung by Sun Li and Yan Wan from the 3rd class of the Chinese department of the 3rd year. Please don't cry tonight." The crowd burst into an uproar again. Damn, Li Jiandong did it on purpose. He definitely did it on purpose. He can't be so wicked as to sing this song, can he? Is he provoking us? The corner of Zhang Ling's eyes twitched violently. The blue veins on her forehead were crawling like snakes, and she gritted her teeth. Zhang Kongyun hurriedly tried to persuade her again. Calm down, calm down. Everything is just a fleeting flower in the eyes and a fleeting sound in the ears. It's all an illusion. An illusion. Zhang Ling also gritted her teeth and said, "All of you go back." Everyone was so scared that they quickly turned around and went back to their own houses. That night, they only heard these students making a ruckus for the entire night. It was only when dawn was about to break the next day that they finally stopped. When they stopped, these Taoist priests then bitterly prepared to go to sleep. But unexpectedly, at this time, there were still students clambering up the mountain. The Taoist priests, who came out to entertain and monitor them vigilantly, asked these students in shock, "Damn, don't you need to sleep?" But the answer of these students almost made them vomit blood. There were only about 200 people camping last night. These Taoist priests burst into tears. What the hell, there's still a shift. Wait, a shift? This means that there will be another concert tonight? When these Taoist priests thought of this, their legs and stomachs immediately began to tremble, and their ears began to cramp. They were not afraid of people singing all night, but no one could stop this group of people from singing. Sure enough, at night, the singing came as scheduled. The Taoist priests up and down Mount Longhu all wanted to cry but had no tears. This lasted for 5 days. After being bombarded for a few days and nights, Zhang Ling and the others felt dizzy, and all they could hear was the distorted singing. She was waiting for these students to go down the mountain early at noon. After taking the opportunity to rest for a while, she suddenly heard another person rushing in with a bang. Zhang Ling finally had a break. She immediately bounced up from the bed like a spring and flew into a rage. "Bastard, can't you see that I'm resting?" The person who came was her disciple, Zhou Ping. Zhou Ping also had 2 dark circles under her eyes. Her face was filled with ecstasy. She pointed to the door and said in a trembling voice, "Master, they're finally gone." That voice and that expression was as if the new China had just been established. Zhang Ling stood up immediately. She was so excited that her whole body was shaking. What? These pests are finally gone? These past few days had really been a nightmare for them. During the day, they had to be on tenterhooks to guard against these students who would cause damage and steal some tools. At night, they had to suffer from their singing. This was supposed to be the golden time for cultivation, but it was all used for this. This was simply not a human life. At this moment, Zhang Ling really felt like crying. She ran all the way out of the door, only to see the other Taoist priests also running out, as if they were serfs who had become masters. They ran to a high place and looked down from above. Sure enough, they saw a continuous stream of cars slowly driving away on the road. After all the cars had driven away, the Taoist priests on Mount Longhu immediately cheered, as if they had won an earth-shattering victory. The Taoist priests cheered and celebrated, tears streaming down their cheeks. F***ck your mother, you bunch of shameless bastards, you finally scram far away from this Taoist grandpa. But these Taoist priests hadn't celebrated for long when they saw another motorcade in the distance, like a long dragon, driving over majestically. Zhang Ling and the rest were flabbergasted as they watched the convoy stop at the foot of the mountain. Following that, a large number of students jumped off, followed by a group of tour guides and student council members, as well as school teachers, leading them up the mountain in a grandiose manner. When the students reached the top of the mountain, Zhang Ling and the rest were dumbstruck when they saw Li Yundong at the head of the group. Li Yundong looked at them with a smile and waved. Everyone, we are here again. Tiannan University has more than 10,000 students, and this is only the second batch. At this moment, Zhang Ling and the Taoist priests around her suddenly felt like jumping off a cliff and committing suicide. Chapter 954. Zhang Ling stared blankly at these students. Some of them were holding the flags of the tourist group, while others were holding the flags of Tiannan University. They were really waving the red flags. At this moment, Zhang Ling really had a feeling that the whole world was covered with these damn little red flags. But this was not the most hateful thing. The most hateful thing was Li Yundong's smiling face. He had a gentle and polite expression on his face, just like a gentleman and a scholar. Even his sworn enemies couldn't help but praise him. He is elegant, modest and graceful. But it was such a person who did such a thing that made people gnash their teeth in anger. Zhang Ling took a deep breath, suppressed her anger, and said to Li Yundong, Jinren Li, you're really good. You're ruthless. How dare you use fatigue bombing? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, Jinren Zhang, I just want to save Zi Yuan. Zhangyi School is the leading cultivation sect in the Chinese cultivation world. I don't want to have a conflict with you, but you insist on not letting her go, so I have to do this. I hope you can forgive me, Jinren Zhang. Li Yundong's soft and hard words made Zhang Ling's face look much better, but she had no intention of giving in. Zhang Ling snorted coldly and said, Li Yundong, I know that you are a sentimental person and want to save Zi Yuan to repay her for saving your life. I also respect your kindness. But let me tell you, dogma is dogma, and sect rules are sect rules. If a sect doesn't have rules, then there won't be any order. If there isn't order, then how can it stand in this world? Li Yundong smiled and said, I understand. I know that you won't agree so easily, so I'm here again. As he spoke, he turned around and nodded to Zhou Qin and the others. Zhou Qin smiled slightly and led the second group of students up the mountain. Zhang Ling looked at the students passing by, gritted her teeth, and said, Li Yundong, let's see who can't stand it first. After that, she snorted with a livid face and took the lead to turn around and leave. The other Taoists also left one after another. Zhang Lufeng glanced at Li Yunyang with flickering eyes, then looked back at her master's back as he left. She couldn't help but sigh in her heart and had no choice but to leave behind them. Li Yundong looked at their backs and smiled confidently. Zhou Qin, who was beside him, asked worriedly, Master, will this really work? Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, How can I know if I don't try? Zhou Qin sighed softly and said, That will be hard on Zi Yuan. Every day she stays in the formation, she will suffer one more day. Master, will her life be in danger if she is locked in the Sanju formation? Li Yundong shook his head and said, No, although Zhang Ling's cultivation of spiritual power is not the best, she is an extremely smart woman. When she found out that Zi Yuan had stolen the sun and moon flowing elixir, even in a rage, she did not choose the most extreme punishment. She just sealed Zi Yuan in the formation. At that time, she could have killed Zi Yuan. She had the reason and the right to do so, but she didn't. Why? It was because Zhang Ling had vaguely guessed that this matter would have something to do with me at that time. So she didn't kill Zi Yuan. Therefore, she chose to lock Zi Yuan in the Sanju formation because she didn't want to make a mess of things. She wanted to wait for a while and see the situation before making a decision. Li Yundong said slowly, If I hadn't come back to life, she would definitely have been rude to Zi Yuan. Maybe she would have locked her up for the rest of her life. But now that I've come back to life, I definitely won't sit back and do nothing. Zhang Ling also knows this, but she can't tell anyone else. If she were to return him to me like this, how could she and the Zhengyi school put their faces in front of others? Therefore, Zhang Ling needs a reason to step down. Zhou Qin's expression was strange. She tried hard to hold back her laughter, as if she was thinking of the scene of the students taking turns to camp at the foot of the main peak of Mount Longhu these past few nights. Master, you don't have to do this, do you? Aren't you afraid that you'll go bankrupt? Li Yundong had moved the students of Tiannan University here in turn to torment the Taoists of the Zhengyi school. Although the effect was good, the cost was equally shocking. Although such a large-scale organization naturally needed the help of several travel agencies at the same time, and they also received the highest price discounts from these travel agencies, the daily cost was still a very frightening figure. Although Li Yundong had the Desanxian, at present, the shop of the Desanxian was being closed for investigation. Li Yundong and the others' economic income was almost zero. Therefore, even a mountain of gold would be eaten up every day. Not to mention that Li Yundong didn't have much savings. If Zhou Qin hadn't contacted Shen Wankai and Li Yundong had temporarily borrowed 2 million yuan from him, he probably wouldn't even have had the money to launch this activity. Although Shen Wankai was rich and was Li Yundong's disciple, Li Yundong knew that it was easy to pay off a debt of money, but it was difficult to repay a debt of gratitude. As a master, if he owed too much to his disciple, how could he teach and guide him? Therefore, Li Yundong really didn't want to borrow money from Shen Wankai unless it was absolutely necessary, even though Shen Wankai had repeatedly stated that the money was a tribute to him. When Li Yundong heard Zhou Qin say this, he smiled and said, "Zhou Qin, if I were locked inside, would you care so much to save me?" Zhou Qin suddenly fell silent. She knew herself very well. If it was Li Yundong who was locked inside, the first thing she would do would be to find a way to go up the mountain. If the hard way didn't work, she would use the soft way. She would definitely do everything she could, even at the cost of her own life. Not to mention worldly possessions like money. Zhou Qin sighed softly in her heart and couldn't help but feel a little envious of Zi Yuan. Her eyes drooped slightly, and a touch of sadness flashed across them, but she soon returned to normal. She smiled and said, "Master, don't worry. With us here, we will definitely be able to save Zi Yuan." Li Yundong smiled, patted Zhou Qin on the shoulder, and said, "I hope so." At this time, Zhang Ling returned to her side hall angrily. Zhou Ping followed her step by step, and many disciples of the Zhengyi school were also following her. Zhou Ping looked at Zhang Ling's dark face and couldn't help but persuade her, "Master, do you want to tell the leader and let him come forward?" Zhang Ling said angrily, "What time is it now? Hasn't the leader been disturbed enough these days? Now is the best time for him to work hard to break through the 9th level of the Thunder Retribution. How can we go to him because of such a trivial matter?" Zhang Kongyun, who was standing to one side, smiled bitterly and said, "It's so noisy at the foot of the mountain. It's noisy during the day and at night. Even if he's in meditation, it's difficult to escape. I'm afraid that the leader will be affected." Zhang Ling's expression changed. She gritted her teeth and said, "Li Yundong is too cruel. He wants to force us to give in." At this time, Zhou Ping tentatively said, "Master, how about we call the police?" Zhang Ling was furious. B****, call the police? Don't you think we've embarrassed ourselves enough? If other sects find out, how can we face others in the future? The dignified Zhengyi school has been stirred up by a group of students, and we're going to call the police? It's really funny. Zhou Ping's face turned red and she didn't dare to say anything more. Zhang Ling thought for a while with a gloomy expression. Suddenly, she thought of something and said, "By the way, where are Deng Yu and Deng Jiao?" "Where are they?" Zhou Ping said, "They're all in the back halls." Zhang Ling stared at Zhou Ping and said, "How have they been these days?" Zhou Ping thought for a moment and said carefully, "They've been chanting scriptures and meditating. They're very well behaved." She laughed and said, "Master, you know their temperaments. They're very well behaved. How could they cause any trouble?" Zhang Ling nodded slowly and said, "That's good. In my opinion, the prestige of our Zhengyi school will fall on the two of them." Zhou Ping was stunned and asked curiously, "Master, why do you say that?" Zhang Ling snorted. "You'll know when the time comes." Zhou Ping thought for a moment and suddenly let out a cry. Her eyes lit up, but then a touch of worry appeared on her face. "Master, I'm afraid this isn't good, is it? The two sisters, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, had never experienced a serious fight. What if something went wrong? What would they do? Master, why don't we let the leader Zhang Ling immediately glared at her sternly. What did you say? Since when did you have the right to criticize the affairs of the Xueqi school? Zhou Ping's cheek suddenly turned red. I'm sorry, Master. I just... Zhang Ling saw that Zhou Ping's eyes had also turned red in the past few days. Although she was also a cultivator couldn't stand being bombarded with fatigue for a few days and nights without rest. What's more, she was just a young girl with a low cultivation quotient. Even if she were to enter the secular world, she would only be a junior or senior female college student. Such a beautiful Taoist nun, who was originally a beautiful Taoist nun, now had 2 dark circles under her eyes, and her eyes were bloodshot. Zhang Ling's heart softened and she couldn't help but sigh. You're still thinking too simply. How could the sect leader's daughter easily fight with others? Even when the heavenly fox was born and the cultivation world was facing the danger of destruction, did the leader of the Chuanjian dragon sect show up? Did the leader of our Xueqi school show up? Zhang Ling earnestly lectured her disciple and said, Pinger, although our Xueqi school is now known as the best in the Chinese Taoist cultivation world, in fact, we are already strong on the outside but weak on the inside. Look at our whole school. There are a large number of young spirit masters, but there are only a few Jinshan masters, and the thunder retribution is even more pitiful. In the past, Shidi, the leader of the sect, and Wang Yuanshan secretly protected us, which was enough to protect the position of Mount Longhu. But in the Battle of Su Yi, Wang Yuanshan actually died. The absolute love extinguishing array was destroyed. Now that the sun and moon flowing elixirs have been stolen, there are not many cards left in our hands. The only deterrent is Shidi, the leader of the sect. Zhang Ling's face was full of grief and worry. She said, now, there are other sects eyeing us covetously and wanting to replace us. Outside, there is the Shen-Tian sect plotting against us. This kind of internal and external dilemma is really a big dilemma that our Mount Longhu has never faced in thousands of years. If the leader fights with Li Yundong again at this time, not to mention how powerful Li Wudi is, even if the leader wins, it won't add much glory to our Mount Longhu. For thousands of years, there have been many masters who have returned from the foot of our Mount Longhu in defeat. We don't need a reincarnated Wisdom King to add to our halo. But if we lose, then the ancestral foundation of the entire Mount Longhu will be shaken. Have you ever thought about this? Zhou Ping was stunned. She naturally knew a lot about what Zhang Ling had said, but she hadn't expected that the current situation of the Xueqi school had reached such a critical point. In her opinion, the Xueqi school was still extremely powerful. As long as they were given some more time, a large number of masters would grow up and become the core backbone of the Xueqi school. But now, the Xueqi school was facing such an embarrassing situation, and such a heavy burden could not be borne by the leader. Therefore, it could only fall on the shoulders of 2 young and delicate people. Zhou Ping had never thought that the 2 Bingdi lotuses she had casually picked up by the lotus pond in the cave of the Linggong sect would become the lifesaver of the Xueqi school. What was even more unexpected was that the division and turmoil of the Xueqi school had also begun because of these 2 Bingdi lotuses. Chapter 955. In the back hall of the Xueqi school, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were sitting cross-legged in a yin-yang formation. They were sitting on the yin-yang formation eye of the formation, echoing each other from left to right. The elder sister, Deng Jiao, lowered her eyes slightly, as if she was meditating with her eyes closed, motionless. The younger sister, Deng Yu, looked a little restless. Her ears twitched from time to time, as if she was listening to the noise outside. She opened her eyes from time to time and winked at her elder sister. Seeing that her elder sister did not move, she had no choice but to call out in a low voice. Hey, elder sister, hey! The 2,000 ruffians led by Li Yundong had tossed Mount Longhu into chaos. Even Zhang Kongyun, who was cultivating on the side peak next to them, couldn't hold on, let alone Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who were in the back hall. Although there were talismans and magic circles that could soundproof in the world, their range was not large. Moreover, making such talismans and magic circles consumed a lot of spiritual energy and zhenqi. At this time, in order to cultivate as fast as possible, Taoist priests were not even willing to spend a little more of their spiritual energy and zhenqi. How could they spend their most precious things on these things? Moreover, when cultivating in this time of spring thunder, the young spirit must go out of the body to absorb the spiritual qi of heaven and earth. But once the yang spirit went out of the body, it would most likely break through the range of the soundproof talismans and magic circles. At that time, all the arrangements would be useless, and it would be a waste of time and Xueqi. Therefore, although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were in the magic circle, they could clearly hear the noise outside. Unfortunately, because of Zhang Ling's order, they could not take a step out of the magic circle. Otherwise, they would have rushed out to meet Li Yundong long ago. In the beginning, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were still a little conflicted. They were very restless in the depths of their hearts, and curiosity gnawed at their hearts crazily. However, as time passed, they slowly calmed down. They were no longer as curious and anxious as they were at the beginning. Deng Jiao had a gentle and peaceful temperament, so she could still hold on. However, her lively younger sister, Deng Yu, kept looking around and scratching her ears and cheeks. After a while, she couldn't help but whisper to Deng Jiao. Deng Jiao heard her sister's shout, but she didn't move at all. She still sat on the futon like a stone statue. Deng Yu felt strange in her heart. She carefully looked at her sister, Deng Jiao, and thought to herself, no way. So powerful? How could she stay calm when it was so noisy outside? Isn't this too exaggerated? Deng Yu couldn't help secretly admiring her sister. She knew that her sister liked to be quiet and not active, but she hadn't expected her sister to have such great concentration. In such a noisy environment, she could still meditate, especially when Li Yundong, whom they both cared about and admired the most, was outside. Sister can even meditate like this. Amazing. Truly amazing. No wonder Master Zhang Ling said that elder sister's cultivation would be higher in the future. Now, it seemed that it was indeed so. Deng Yu was secretly admiring him when she suddenly heard a burst of heavy breathing and a burst of light snoring coming from the side. Deng Yu listened carefully and almost fainted. The voice was coming from her sister, Deng Jiao. Good heavens, I praised you for a long time, but you fell asleep? Deng Yu was so angry that she gritted her teeth. She wanted to rush over and shake her sister awake, but she didn't dare to get up, let alone take a step. This was because Zhang Ling had specifically told them that once they entered a meditative state, they couldn't change their positions at will. The entire formation was filled with powerful spiritual power and Xueqi. Except for the yin and yang formation eyes, the other places could be said to be impenetrable. Not even a fly could land. Deng Yu clearly remembered that Zhang Ling had once thrown a sword into the activated formation in front of them. As a result, the powerful Xueqi in the formation had instantly crushed the sword into countless pieces, only to make Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's pretty faces turn pale with fright. But the most frightening thing was not that the two of them couldn't move easily in the magic formation, but that Li Yundong had come not long after they had entered the magic formation, which made the two of them restless. If it weren't for the magic formation and Zhang Ling's strict order, they would have jumped out immediately. Deng Yu saw that her sister had not slept or rested for the past few days, so she was so tired that she had actually fallen asleep in meditation. Her head began to fall little by little, and her body was leaning forward little by little, which scared her so much that her hair stood on end. Deng Yu was afraid that her sister, Deng Jiao, would tilt and fall into the formation. If that happened, she would be instantly crushed into meat paste. Even God would not be able to save her, so she hurriedly shouted, "Sister! Sister, wake up! Sister, wake up, sister! Deng Jiao, Deng Jiao!" But no matter how she shouted, Deng Jiao never opened her eyes. Her head was still moving, and her body was leaning more and more. Deng Jiao had been bombarded by the noise outside for the past few days. At this time, she was extremely tired and fell asleep. How could she be woken up by Deng Yu's shouts? Deng Yu saw that her body was leaning more and more, and she was so scared that her face turned pale. She looked around and quickly thought of a solution. After glancing at the pair of blue cloth shoes on her feet, she immediately had an idea. She peeled off the shoes on her feet with both hands and threw them at Deng Jiao. The bottom of the shoe solidly smacked onto Deng Jiao's smooth and full forehead, causing her to cry out in shock. She was startled awake from her drowsy sleep. Deng Yu laughed out loud, convulsing with laughter. "Sister, do my feet smell good?" As she said that, she proudly raised one of her feet and dangled her jade-white foot in front of her, her 5 plump toes playfully scratching each other. Deng Jiao covered her forehead with one hand and picked up the cloth shoes with the other. She was so angry that she laughed and said angrily, "Sister, you're so annoying. You scared me to death. It stinks. It's really stinky feet." Deng Yu snorted and said, "Bah, you're the stinky feet. If I hadn't woken you up, I'm afraid that your body would have fallen into the magic formation and died. You won't be able to see Li Yundong again, let alone talk to him." Deng Jiao's pretty face turned slightly red and she said angrily, "What nonsense are you talking about? I dare you to say it again." Deng Yu said with a smile, "How about it? Bite me? Come over and bite me." Deng Jiao raised the shoes in her hand angrily and was about to throw them away when she suddenly heard footsteps coming from outside the hall. Then, a few figures flashed in front of the window. Deng Jiao was so scared that she quickly sat down. She looked around and wanted to hide Deng Yu's shoes, but there was nothing in the hall except for the towering statue in front of her. She had to lift her butt and hide the shoes under her rush cushion. In this magic formation, only the position of the rush cushion did not have any zhenqi flow, so this hiding did not cause any other abnormalities. Deng Yu also quickly hid his bare feet while sitting cross-legged. Then, he used his Taoist robe to cover them up so that no abnormalities could be seen. After the two of them were done quickly, they saw the door open with a bang. Zhang Ling led a group of Taoist priests into the hall one by one. Zhang Ling's sharp eyes swept the whole. She saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao sitting upright, dignified and solemn. She couldn't help but nod with satisfaction. In the past few days, she had finally seen such a thing that made her a little happy. Li Yundong's tiresome bombardment really made the Xueqi school suffer to the extreme. After quarreling during the day, almost no one could cultivate normally. The three-shift system of Tiannan University almost made the Taoist priests and nuns collapse. Many people could not stand it anymore and privately asked Zhang Ling if there was any other solution. Although Zhang Ling had always been indifferent to this kind of surrender, she also knew that she could not let Li Yundong continue to toss around endlessly. Even if Li Yundong did not toss around all the time, in about 10 days, the golden period of cultivation would be over. If he wanted to cultivate again and break through the realm, it would be even more difficult. Moreover, this matter would definitely become the laughingstock of other sections. There might even be some people with ulterior motives who would use this method to deal with the Xueqi school. At that time, it would be a real headache. Therefore, Zhang Ling knew that the Xueqi school would definitely make concessions in this matter, but this kind of concession would be extremely limited, and there might even be some sinister intentions. When Zhang Ling had locked Zi Yuan in the Sanju formation, of course, she had not made this decision on a whim. At that time, she had already had a premonition that Li Yundong might come to save Zi Yuan, so she had deliberately locked Zi Yuan in the Sanju formation. In case Li Yundong forcibly took her away, it would be impossible for him to take Zi Yuan away unless he could break the Sanju formation. Therefore, this was the trump card that Zhang Ling had left behind. Zhang Ling was now extremely glad that she had not been impulsive at that time. She was even more glad that she had made a wise decision to seal Zi Yuan in the Sanju formation. Otherwise, she might really be embarrassed this time, and the Xueqi school would also be notorious. In her opinion, no matter how powerful Li Yundong was, it was impossible for her to break the Sanju formation. Even Wang Yuanshan, with his magical powers, did not dare to enter the formation of the Shantian sect. When it was time to admit defeat, she would immediately admit defeat without hesitation. Although Li Yundong's cultivation had reached the peak, the Sanju formation specialized in restraining all kinds of top experts. Even a golden immortal master would have to admit defeat if he entered the formation. However, no matter how powerful the formation was, it was still activated by people. In particular, the Sanju formation was directly dependent on the yin and yang sword souls. If the sword soul was cold-blooded, the formation would be indestructible. If the sword soul had compassion, then the formation would be in danger of being broken. Zhang Ling was not a fool. She knew that when Zhou Ping brought Deng Yu and Deng Jiao to her, the origin of this pair of Bingdi lotus was a little unclear. But after such a long time, it was impossible for her not to know anything about it. Especially when the pair of Bingdi lotus talked about Li Yundong, their eyes shone with admiration, which made Zhang Ling even more vigilant and impressed. Therefore, in order to prevent the two sword souls of the Sanju formation from showing mercy in the formation, she had specially set up a temporary formation. The power of this formation was extremely powerful. Not only could it summon the past immortal ascension masters of the Xueqi school, but it could also make the spiritual power of the people in the formation unprecedentedly strong. But the most important thing was that when the divine souls of the victims were possessed, their past divine senses and memories would be shielded and concealed for a short period of time. This also meant that when fighting in the magic formation, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao would definitely not show mercy to Li Yundong. because at this time, they did not know Li Yundong at all. Chapter 956. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at Zhang Ling timidly. They both knew that Zhang Ling was strict and had a high prestige in the Xueqi school. Except for the sect leader, Celestial Master Zhang. Although some of the others had higher cultivation than Zhang Ling, no one dared to disobey her. They knew that if Zhang Ling knew that one of them had fallen asleep in the magic formation and almost died, and the other had been playing around with a cloth shoe, she would definitely be scolded severely. Therefore, one of them kept moving her body, as if what she was sitting on was not a cloth shoe, but a brazier. The other one always wanted to pull the tail of her Taoist robe, as if she wanted to cover her bare foot. Zhang Ling saw that their expressions were a little strange, and their bodies were constantly twisting slightly. She had been very restless in the past few days, so she did not take their abnormal behavior to heart. She only thought that it was their first time entering this kind of magic formation and their first time receiving the god's vanquishing spell, so she was a little nervous. Almost every Taoist sect had a shentong. This kind of shentong was not compatible with the shentong of Lin Youfa's Divine Fist sect. The shentong of Divine Fist sect mostly invited the gods of the heavens, while the shentong of Xueqi school and other Taoist sects invited the ancestors who had ascended to heaven. To invite the gods of the heavens to possess one's body, one needed a very strong body. Moreover, the divine power of the gods was not something that ordinary people could bear. Unless one was the reincarnation of a god, if an ordinary person invited a god to possess one's body, it would more or less cause irreversible damage to the caster. This was why the shentong of Divine Fist sect seemed to be very strong, but in fact, it was not valued by the Chinese Taoist sects, and was even regarded as a non-mainstream sect. This kind of shentong was even more non-mainstream. Only those who did not enter the mainstream would use this kind of shentong to kill 10,000 enemies and damage 3,000 oneself. Respectfully inviting the ancestors of the past to possess one's body was another matter. The first generation of patriarchs were mostly immortals, not gods. They could not withstand the power of god force, but the same could not be said for immortal force. Moreover, the patriarchs and the users of the technique were mostly from the same sect. Their cultivation of divine arts, magic power, and true essence were all from the same source. Thus, it was easier for the user to accept the technique, allowing them to display 100% of their strength. Lin Youfa had once invited Marshal Tianpeng and the Holy Emperor Guan, who was far away in the Tianzuan phase, to fight with him. But in the end, they couldn't even defeat Li Yundong, who hadn't even reached the Zhuji phase. Instead, they were defeated by Su Chan once, and his arm was broken by Li Yundong once. If this kind of god-inviting spell could bring out a god's 100% strength, wouldn't it mean that even the head god of the Big Dipper and warrior Saint Guan you couldn't defeat an ordinary person who hadn't reached the foundation building realm? This was simply the biggest joke in the world. However, the immortal arrival formation of the Xueqi school was not suitable. Once the patriarchs of each generation possessed them, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao would be able to transform into extremely powerful golden immortal masters within a certain period of time. Zhang Ling also knew that if only Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, these two golden immortal masters, were to fight face-to-face with Li Wudi, who had fought in hundreds of battles and forced the gods and Buddhas to retreat with one palm, the result would be one word: defeat. However, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were the sword souls of the Triultimates array, and the array itself was a massive lever. Even if they were weak, they could still unleash an astonishing might from the Triultimates array. But if they were golden immortal experts, then with the addition of the array as a massive lever, the might they could unleash was truly unimaginable. Archimedes. Give me a fulcrum, and I can pry up the whole earth. The relationship between the triple ultimate formation and Deng Yu and Deng Jiao was just like this sentence. Zhang Ling firmly believed that Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who were in the triple ultimate formation, were absolutely invincible. Even if the gods descended to the mortal world, they would still be crushed into powder. Thinking of this, Zhang Ling's spirit was lifted. She turned to the few Taoist priests beside her and said, "Get ready." The few Taoist priests did not say a word. Their figures flashed, and they stood in the four corners of the Great Night Hall, their hands forming incantations. Zhang Ling said to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, "Are you ready?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao saw that Zhang Ling did not notice their previous abnormality, and hurriedly nodded. Zhang Ling nodded in satisfaction. She waved her sleeve and shouted, "Activate the formation." The Taoist priests standing in the four corners began to chant incantations. For a moment, the formation of the Great Night Hall shone brilliantly, and divine light shot up to the sky. Fortunately, it was daytime, and a beam of white light shot up to the sky from the Great Night Hall. It was not very conspicuous, otherwise, if the rebellious students of Mount Longhu saw it, they would immediately turn the sky upside down. This beam of light shot straight into the sky, breaking through the clouds in the sky, as if it had forcibly torn a gap on the border between the heaven realm and the mortal realm. From this gap, one golden figure after another was faintly discernible in the clouds. After these figures appeared one by one, two figures suddenly flew down from the beam of light. The speed at which the two figures descended was extremely fast, as if they were two beams of white light. The two beams of white light shot into the Great Night Hall's array formation like sharp arrows and immediately turned into countless beams of white light that converged within the yin-yang array formation. The light within the array formation flowed and rotated. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were sitting cross-legged in the middle of the formation. At first, their eyes were still closed, but both of them could hear the strong wind blowing in their ears, and the sound of whispering came from the wind. It sounded like chanting coming from a faraway place. The two of them curiously opened their eyes, and saw the white light flowing around them. Divine light overflowed from their feet, rising and falling like the waves of the sea. The two of them were dazzled by what they saw. At this moment, the white light and the overflowing divine light converged towards the two eyes of the formation, and then through the eyes, they were transmitted upwards. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's bodies immediately trembled, and they felt an incomparably large amount of power being transmitted into their bodies. Their blood vessels felt like boiling lava, and their entire bodies felt like they were on fire. Zhang Ling stared at the two of them with her large eyes, for fear that they would make a mistake. But at this moment, no matter if it was Deng Yu, Deng Jiao, or Zhang Ling, or the Taoist priests surrounding the Great Night Palace, none of them noticed that under the praying mat beneath Deng Jiao, there was a thick and solid nano-layered Saul's cloth shoe that forcibly blocked a portion of the white light and divine light from flowing into Deng Jiao's body. One of the most important reasons why the Taoist priests and monks chose to sit on praying mats woven from grass and leaves instead of praying mats woven from other tools was that praying mats had a strong air permeability. When cultivators were cultivating, the Huiyin acupoint was an extremely important acupoint. Not only could it absorb the qi of the earth, but it could also expel waste gas from the body, so that the qi of the upper and lower parts of the body, the qi of heaven and earth, and the qi of the inside and outside of the body could be fused. If they were sitting on an airtight praying mat, the qi would be blocked, and the qi would stagnate. The cloth shoes Deng Yu was wearing were handmade by the Taoist priests of the Xueqi school. This kind of cloth shoes was very different from ordinary handmade cloth shoes. Not only did these Taoist priests have to meditate and cultivate, but most of the time, they also had to refine their fleshly bodies, practice body-strengthening techniques, and patrol around Mount Longhu. They even had to wear them on long journeys to cultivate their foundation. This kind of cloth shoes was extremely hard. An ordinary person would not be able to leave a scratch on the soles of the shoes even if they used a knife. This showed the level of hardness of the cloth shoes. Deng Jiao did not know that the cloth shoe she had casually hidden under her body had forcibly blocked a portion of the spiritual power and zhenqi from entering her body. It had also blocked a portion of the spiritual sense and soul of the two grandmasters of the Xueqi school that had been invited by the spirit-inviting spell. No matter how powerful Zhang Ling was, she could not have expected that there would be such a loophole in her carefully prepared and foolproof plan. In particular, she never expected that there would be a white light lingering around the Great Night Hall formation, neither dispersing nor converging. This was actually a portion of the zhenqi and soul that had not completely entered Deng Jiao's body. As the saying goes, there is a loophole in 100 secrets. Just as she was preparing her final trump card, the students of Tiannan University, led by Li Yundong, had already changed 4 batches of people. After the last batch of students came to Mount Longhu for a few days, it had already entered the Qingming festival. The ancients had a poem. During the Qingming festival, the rain was heavy, and the passers-by on the road were heartbroken. Mount Longhu in Jiangxi was originally a place with plenty of rain. When it came to the Qingming festival, it would rain almost all day long. The air humidity suddenly increased, and even cultivators would feel as if there was a layer of water hanging all over their bodies, which was extremely uncomfortable. Cultivators were most afraid of moisture entering their bodies. It was already extremely difficult to cultivate in such a season. If they wanted to go through the thunder retribution, it would simply be a fool's dream. Li Yundong had made a lot of trouble in Mount Longhu, which had forcibly delayed the cultivation of the entire Xueqi school for a long time. It really made the people of the Xueqi school miserable. They were so depressed that they wanted to vomit blood. If it weren't for the fact that they really could not beat Li Yundong, they would have already torn him into pieces. As the saying goes, cutting off one's way to wealth is like killing one's parents. Businessmen pursued profits, and cultivators pursued inexhaustible power. Li Yundong's approach was really sinister and vicious. The people of the Xueqi school were all resentful. They looked at the students of Tiannan University with green eyes. If looks could kill, the students of Tiannan University would have died hundreds of times over. No matter how painful a nightmare was, there would be an end one day. When the Qingming festival came, Li Yundong was finally ready to stop. He looked at the Taoists of Xueqi school in front of him, who were staring at him angrily. With a smile on his face, he said something that almost made them jump off the cliff together. "Everyone, we'll see you next year." Zhang Lufeng, who admired Li Yundong, almost fainted when she heard this. She exclaimed, "What? Come again next year?" Li Yundong looked around and saw that there was no one else around, so he said with a smile, "Of course, as long as Zi Yuan is not rescued, I will not abandon her. If she is not rescued for a year, I will bring people to Mount Longhu every year at this time to burn incense and worship the gods." Zhang Lufeng patted her forehead and groaned in pain. "Oh my God, just kill me now." Zhou Ping's face showed anger and she shouted, "Li Yundong, don't dig deep into the soft soil." Li Yundong didn't wait for her to finish speaking and interrupted her. "Everyone, goodbye." Zhou Ping was so angry that smoke was coming out of her 7 orifices. Just as she was about to speak, she saw Li Yundong turn around and leave. The Taoists of Xueqi school were furious and said at the same time, "Brothers of the Tao, will Li Yundong come again next year? What should we do? Will we still be able to cultivate? Will we still be able to live?" While they were talking angrily, a loud voice suddenly came. It was Zhang Ling's extremely satisfied voice. "Zhenren Li, take care. I have something to say." Chapter 957. When Li Yundong heard Zhang Ling's voice, his heart skipped a beat and he turned around. The teachers and students of Tiannan University behind him had all gone down the mountain at this time. Only a few people were looking at Li Yundong, as if they didn't understand why he hadn't gone down the mountain yet. Li Yundong looked in the direction of Zhang Ling's voice, only to see her walking towards him with a smile on her face. Her smile was full of confidence, and she looked radiant and energetic. Compared to the way she had been tortured over the past few days, she looked like a completely different person. Li Yundong thought to himself. Li Yundong's heart trembled, but his face remained calm. He still smiled and asked, "Zhenren Zhang, I haven't seen you for a few days. You look radiant and in good spirits." Zhang Ling snorted angrily in her heart and said with a fake smile, "You flatter me." "Thanks to you, Zhenren Li," Li Yundong said with a smile. "What are you talking about? I don't deserve it. However, Zhenren Zhang has been really caring for us these past few days, and I'm really grateful. At this time next year, I will come to visit you with my classmates." Zhang Ling snorted, and the smile on her face became more and more strange. She said with a faint smile, "Zhenren Li, you're too polite. Our Longhu Mountain can't afford it. How about this, Zhenren Li, you don't have to bother us. Don't you want to save Zi Yuan? Okay, I'll let you save her." Li Yundong was shocked. Even a great Zhenren with profound cultivation and shrewdness couldn't help but be moved and show a look of ecstasy. But this was only a momentary change. Soon, he laughed and said, "Zhenren Zhang, do you agree? If you agree earlier, it will save you and me trouble, won't it?" Zhang Ling sneered and said, "Zhenren Li, don't be happy so early. Do you think you can take her away so easily?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Zhenren Zhang Ling, if you have any Tao, just draw it. I'll take it." Zhou Qin, who had been watching Li Yundong, suddenly exclaimed no. Her cry shocked the other teachers and students who had not left. They all looked at them. Zhou Qin's eyes quickly swept over them and she came to Li Yundong's side. She lowered her voice and said, "Master, you can't agree so easily." Zhang Ling came prepared. She must be prepared. Be careful. You can't have anything happen to you. Li Yundong had been saved by Zi Yuan and had come back to life. For Zhou Qin, this was like going from hell to heaven. When she thought of the hazy, terrifying and cold days, she shuddered. She couldn't believe how she had survived. Zhou Qin absolutely did not want to see Li Yundong die in front of her again. She also did not want Li Yundong to think of a way to save Zi Yuan at the risk of his life. That would be the most terrible nightmare. Zhou Qin's eyes seemed calm, but Li Yundong could see the deep trembling and fear in her eyes. This was a kind of infatuation and palpitation that came from deep and bitter love. This kind of gaze was the one that Li Yundong had shown after Zhou Qin's legs had recovered. She had thought that Li Yundong would leave her after she recovered and had committed suicide by jumping off a building upstairs. He knew very well in his heart that Zhou Qin loved him very deeply. This kind of love, which was close to obsession and madness, made a proud and outstanding woman like her endure the torture of jealousy and the pain of secret love, just to stay by his side, to look at him one more time, and to listen to him one more time. That was enough. Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin's silent eyes and looked at the deep love in them. He couldn't help but tremble in his heart. His voice suddenly softened as he whispered, "Don't be silly. If you were locked in the magic formation, you know that I would also come to save you at all costs." These words almost instantly turned Zhou Qin's heart into a gurgling spring water. It seemed that all the waiting and sacrifice she had made in the past was just for this sentence. Everything was worth it. At this moment, Zhou Qin suddenly had the urge to throw herself into Li Yundong's arms and burst into tears, but she didn't, because she knew that there were still many people watching them. She was Li Yundong's disciple, not his girlfriend, let alone his lover. Zhou Qin's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong. There was a storm in her chest, like thunder rolling, but her face was calm as usual. Only more and more tears were rolling in her eyes. Zhou Qin wiped away her tears, smiled, and said in a trembling voice, "I know, master. I know. But I just don't want to see you again. As Zhou Qin said this, she couldn't go on any longer. Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin with gentle eyes. He sighed softly in his heart and raised his hand, wanting to gently stroke Zhou Qin's long black hair. However, when his hand was raised into the air, it finally fell on her shoulder. Li Yundong said softly, "Don't worry, I won't die so easily. I promise you, I will come back alive." Zhou Qin smiled with tears in her eyes and said, "Well, master, this is what you promised. Even if it's not for me, for Su Chan, you have to come back alive, okay?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and nodded. "It's a deal." The two of them talked as if there was no one else around. Zhang Ling, who was watching from one side, sighed in her heart. Since ancient times, most cultivators have paid attention to pure hearts and few desires, and some have even been ruthless and abstinent. Looking at the Chinese cultivation world, I'm afraid that only Lu Dongbin, who is known to be involved in wine, women, avarice and temper, can compare with him. Lu Dongbin had been a romantic all his life. When he was traveling in the world, he had fought in the bedroom with countless women, but he had never lost. He could also be called an extraordinary person in the Chinese cultivation world. Although Li Yundong was also a romantic person like Lu Dongbin and had tender feelings for the fairer sex, he was much more devoted than Lu Dongbin, especially in the ancient battle of Mount Tianlong. For Su Chan, he didn't hesitate to commit suicide. This feeling was really touching. Even a cultivator like her, who had always been indifferent to feelings and whose heart had long been like a dry well, was deeply shocked by it. Zhang Ling could see that Li Yundong was no longer the Yuanyang boy from before. Although he was no longer a Yuanyang boy, his Dharma power and Zhenqi did not retreat, but advanced instead. They were more powerful than before. Moreover, he was hard and soft, and yin and yang helped each other. He had the fierce and explosive fierceness of the past, but he had the lasting strength. His fighting strength was really terrifying. If it weren't for the 3-Ju formation of the Zhengyi school and the trump card of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, she really wouldn't have dared to compete with Li Yundong in fighting. However, admiration was admiration. After all, she and Li Yundong were from different sections. Although sometimes they could sit down quietly and say a few words, most of the time, they represented the interests of their respective sections. They talked and sparks flew in all directions, not giving in to each other. Zhang Ling admired Li Yundong's infatuation and profound Dharma power. In fact, Li Yundong also admired Zhang Ling's stubbornness and persistence. Li Yundong's cultivation had reached the peak, and he could be called the first person in the world. If one wanted to stay calm in front of him, it was absolutely impossible without great determination and courage. Zhang Ling silently watched Li Yundong and Zhou Qin talk. When he turned around, she asked, "Zhenren Li, have you finished what you should have said?" Li Yundong smiled and said to Zhou Qin, Take the students and teachers back first. I've caused you a lot of trouble this time. I guess your father will be angry when he hears about what I've done. Apologize to him for me. Xueqi had also proposed to use the power of her father, Li Yuanhua, and even Chen Wankai to put pressure on the Zhengyi school to let Zi Yuan go back. But this proposal was quickly rejected by Li Yundong. Not to mention that Li Yundong was now the strongest person in the world by default in the cultivation world. If he wanted to save a person, it would be a joke if he used the power of the government. At that time, all the glorious deeds he had done would immediately collapse. Just look at the attitude of the country towards the cultivation world. They would never get involved in this kind of thing. As long as the cultivation sects did not affect the normal secular world, they would be happy to see it. If they helped Li Yundong save Zi Yuan, the prestige of the Zhengyi school would collapse. This kind of thing would do more harm than good for them. Moreover, Li Yuanhua and Xueqi were now senior provincial officials. The state's control over provincial officials was extremely strict. If any senior official above the provincial level had too much entanglement with religious people, he would be discarded. Not to mention using his power to help Li Yundong get Zi Yuan back. This was simply courting death. Their political enemies would be happy to use this to stab them. In the land of the Celestial Empire, corruption and book chasing was sometimes not a very serious problem. Which official didn't have some dirty things under his butt? Weren't they still enjoying their lives just as much as before? Those who should be greedy continued to be greedy, and those who played with women continued to play. Those who did bad things were often exposed because they were too high profile, or they were caught in a political struggle. At this time, corruption and book chasing was a deadly sin. But what was even more terrifying than these things were actually ideological issues, and religious issues were precisely ideological issues. In this matter, the Celestial Empire had never been soft-hearted. They would rather kill the wrong person than let go. Yi Dao, Phelan and Hongji many years ago were vivid examples. Li Yundong had already made a lot of noise recently. At this time, if he went to find Xueqi again, it would be like sending a gun into the hands of Dang Gua. Then he would shout, "I'm going to ascend to immortality. Come and kill me." Li Yundong could ascend and escape, but what about the people around him? Xueqi also knew that her proposal was not reliable at all, but she had to mention it because she had to make a stand. Whether Li Yundong accepted it or not was his business. Seeing that Li Yundong was still thinking about these things at this time, Xueqi couldn't help but feel her heart soften and warm. She forced a smile, wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, and said, "Master, take care. I'll go down the mountain first. I'll wait for you at the foot of the mountain. As long as you don't come back, I won't leave." Li Yundong looked at her helplessly. He knew that his disciple was stubborn and would not shed tears until she saw the coffin. Sometimes she couldn't change what she had decided. Li Yundong sighed, turned his face, and said to Zhongling, "Zhenren Zhong, let's go." Zhongling smiled slightly and led the way to the back of Mount Longhu. At first, the two of them walked slowly. When they were out of the sight of the teachers and students of Tiannan University, Zhongling jumped up and rushed toward the back of the mountain like lightning. Li Yundong didn't seem to take any steps. He just took a normal step and appeared more than 10 meters away. He was close to Zhongling and didn't fall behind at all. Zhongling quickly took Li Yundong to the cliff at the back of the mountain. She turned her head to look at Li Yundong and said meaningfully, "Li Yundong, you have to think it through. This is the Sanju formation of our Zhengyi school. It's a dangerous place, the abyss of hell. If you jump down, it will be too late to regret." Li Yundong smiled. He didn't wait for Zhongling to jump down, but he jumped down first. Chapter 958. As soon as Li Yundong jumped off the cliff, his body froze in mid-air. He only needed to take a look to see that there were two long swords inserted into the steep cliff wall. On the hilts of the swords stood two slender and elegant figures. The two women looked exactly the same. They stood side by side, their toes gently touching the hilts of the swords. A gust of wind blew. Although they were wearing Taoist robes, they still exuded a delicate and pretty aura. Their figures were light, as if they were about to fly away with the wind. Li Yundong saw that the two women were extremely familiar. He took a closer look and found that they were the former sisters, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. Li Yundong was shocked. Although he had gone up Mount Longhu several times, he had either sneaked up the mountain or been on the mountain with many people. At the inauguration ceremony of the Linggong sect, Although he and Deng Yu and Deng Jiao had been present at the same time, Li Yundong's attention had been focused on Takahashi Shota and the other Japanese, Zi Yuan, Su Chan, and the others. Although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were a pair of beautiful flowers, they were inexperienced and there were thousands of cultivators present. Naturally, they could not stand at the front. Therefore, although they saw Li Yundong, he did not see them. When Li Yundong suddenly saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, he was immediately overjoyed. He suddenly remembered that he had met the two sisters on campus when he was in school, and he remembered the tragic situation of the sisters when he had met them at the Shangyuan Hotel. Then he had chased after young Master He in anger, which had led to the divine tribulation. Since then, his life had completely changed. He had completely changed from an ordinary student to a cultivator. Who would have thought that when they met on campus a year ago, one was a popular student on campus, and the other two were pure and innocent sisters. But now, one of them was the invincible Li Wudi, and the other two were the sword spirits of the Sanju array of the Zhengyi school. The vicissitudes of life really made people sigh with emotion. Li Yundong was ecstatic and sighed. He couldn't help but say happily, "Deng Yu? Deng Jiao? I didn't expect you to still be alive." Unexpectedly, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao stared at Li Yundong with extremely sharp eyes. They didn't say a word, and their eyes were full of hostility. Li Yundong was stunned and vaguely felt that something was wrong. He turned his head to look at Zhang Ling, who had quickly followed him, and said in an unfriendly tone, "Zhenren Zhang, what's going on?" Zhang Ling chuckled and said, "Zhenren Li, don't waste your time. I know you have a good relationship with them. Don't try to get close to them." Li Yunyang was slightly angry, and he asked in a cold voice, "Zhenren Zhang, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao are my classmates and my friends. Back then, the two of them fell off a building and died. Although I don't know why they came back to life here, I don't want them to be involved in this matter." Zhang Ling shook her head and said, "Zhenren Li, it's too late. If it was still that ordinary youngster, I could give them some face and let the two of them go down the mountain. But unfortunately no, it's the invincible Li Wudi, and they are the disciples of our Zhengyi school. Now they are the two sword souls of the Sanju formation. How could I let them go?" As Zhang Ling said this, her tone suddenly changed. She smiled slightly and said, "Besides, Zhenren Li, don't you think it's wonderful? They used to be classmates and friends, but now they are fighting each other. Is this fate or fate?" Li Yundong couldn't help but say angrily, "What bullshit fate? What bullshit fate? Don't you think it's despicable and shameful to put the burden of Zhengyi school on the shoulders of the two of them? How long have they been cultivating? How high are their cultivation quotients?" Although Zhang Ling's cultivation quotient was not as good as Li Yundong's, she was not afraid of him when it came to bickering. Zhang Ling sneered and said, "You forced me to do this. If it were me, would I have a better way?" Li Yundong was speechless when he heard this. Although his cultivation quotient had reached the peak and he was invincible in fighting, he was not a person who relied on his fists to run amok. On the contrary, he was a person who could distinguish right from wrong and was reasonable. He valued affection and righteousness, kept his promises, persuaded good people to do good, hated evil as if it were his enemy, and helped the weak eliminate the violent. He did not use his profound spiritual energy to bully others, and he did not use his invincible fighting methods to suppress others. This was the strange charm of Li Yundong. This was also the reason why, even though he had done many things that shocked the world and had conflicts with various cultivation sects and were hostile to each other, many people were still in awe of him. Even Zhang Ling, who had disliked Li Yundong very much in the past, now looked at him with new eyes and admired him in her heart. Hearing Zhang Ling's words, Li Yundong also understood that the current situation of the Zhengyi school was really forced. If he had been in Zhang Ling's position and did not have such profound spiritual energy and cultivation quotient, he would probably have made the same choice as her. This was to say, one's position determined one's brain, and one's position determined one's thinking. Li Yundong took a deep breath and stopped arguing with Zhang Ling. He said, "Zhenren Zhang, since we have our own masters, don't blame me for being rude later." Zhang Ling snorted and said, "Zhenren Li, please do as you please. If we can break this magic formation, our Zhengyi school will naturally admit defeat." After that, she turned to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao and shouted, "Sanju formation, set up." Clang, clang, clang. In an instant, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao moved, and the long swords under their feet seemed to be pulled out by two invisible arms. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's figures also slowly moved out with the long swords, and then the whole cliff began to tremble. When the long swords were completely pulled out, there was a rumbling sound on the cliff. The huge rock, which had been closed, immediately opened to both sides, revealing a huge cave. One could only faintly see fluorescent lights flashing one after another inside the cave, endlessly extending inside, making the cave look extremely deep and gloomy. Li Yundong's eyes narrowed, and he saw a vague figure in the cave at a glance. His heart immediately shook and he subconsciously wanted to rush in, but as soon as he moved, he saw countless sharp blades appearing around him. These sharp blades were like countless soldiers in armor, surrounding Li Yundong. As long as he made any strange movements, the long swords would immediately come out of their sheaths, creating a sword light and sword shadow, and chop Li Yundong into meat sauce. Li Yundong was stunned, and then his eyes narrowed slightly. His eyes shot straight at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao like sharp swords. He said slowly, "Deng Yu, Deng Jiao, do you really want to be my enemy? Do you really not recognize me at all?" Li Yundong had fought countless battles, and his cultivation had already reached the transcendent realm. He had long cultivated an extremely amazing momentum and aura. At this time, his face was expressionless. Although his voice was not loud and his tone was very calm, it revealed a kind of power without anger, which made people tremble in fear. If Deng Yu and Deng Jiao hadn't practiced in the magic formation, they would have been overwhelmed by Li Yundong's majesty at this moment. The power of the magic formation would not even be able to exert half of its power, and it would be broken in an instant. But at this time, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao both had the divine senses and power of the ancestors of the Xueqi school in their bodies. Not only had their cultivation reached the terrifying golden immortal realm in a short period of time, but they also had extremely rich experience in fighting. The two of them seemed to not hear Li Yundong's voice. They just stared at him coldly, without a trace of humanity in their bodies. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were twin lotus flowers on one branch. They were sisters and had the same mind. When the two of them controlled the magic formation, the power was really terrifying. As soon as they thought of this, the countless sharp blades on both sides of Li Yundong rushed toward him like a storm. Li Yundong had experienced countless battles and even fought with all the gods and Buddhas. Naturally, he was not afraid of such a scene. He was not in a hurry. He pinched his fingers and slowly walked toward the magic formation. Zhang Ling saw that there was no trace of golden light around Li Yundong, but when the countless sharp blades around him hit him, she could clearly see traces of golden ripples bouncing off the sharp blades. The dense sharp blades almost covered Li Yundong's whole body, without any blind spots. At this time, if a master of lightning retribution was here, he would probably be chopped into meat paste. However, Li Yundong seemed to be taking a leisurely stroll. He just pinched his hands and slowly walked toward the stone cave. His figure was in mid-air, and with every step he took, a lotus bloomed behind him. Soon, the lotus grew, bloomed, withered, declined, and finally disappeared without a trace. Zhang Ling couldn't help but admire Li Yundong in her heart when she saw that he was able to move so easily, and every step he took was like a Buddha in the world or a golden immortal descending to the world. But she also knew that this was only the joint attack of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao outside the three-Ju formation. Their real strength could only be seen in the magic formation. The magic formation was a huge device. It could contain the power of hundreds or even thousands of cultivators. Therefore, the higher the cultivation of the person in charge of the magic formation, the greater the power of the magic formation. Li Yundong strolled all the way to the entrance of the cave. As soon as he stepped into the stone cave, he immediately heard a buzzing sound in his ears. His vision went black, as if he had entered another world, and he could hardly see anything. Li Yundong's cultivation had long been able to make him see in the dark as if it were day, but at this time, there was suddenly darkness in front of him, as if he had suddenly lost his sight. It made him want to look back and see if it was the way he had come. However, Li Yundong knew that there were three realms of fighting. The first one was about the superiority of Shentong and treasures. The second one was about the superiority of Dharma power and Shintong, and the third one was about the superiority of realm and Taoist heart. There was suddenly darkness in front of his eyes. It must be the abnormality of stepping into the three ultimate formation. If he had a little bit of Taoist heart, he would immediately be smashed to pieces, and the tragedy of body and soul would be destroyed. He absolutely could not be careless. Li Yundong's heart was as calm as still water. He immediately stood still, holding the Buddha's hand gesture in his hand, and reciting the mantra of 9 words. Hey! This shout was like a sharp golden sword cutting through the thick dark clouds, immediately causing the air around Li Yundong to tremble violently. Li Yundong's eyes suddenly lit up, and the darkness disappeared in an instant. As soon as Li Yundong focused his eyes, he saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, both with cold expressions, holding 2 3-foot-long Qingfeng swords in their hands, stabbing towards him from both sides. The 2 swords were as fast as lightning and as fierce as thunder. As soon as Li Yundong saw it clearly, he saw that the tip of the sword had already reached his skin, making all the hair on his body stand up. The jinshin outside his skin was pierced in an instant. Li Yundong's perfect jade body was immediately broken, and a trace of blood oozed out of his skin. The pupils in Li Yundong's eyes shrank like needles in an instant. He had fought with the mystical silver fox several times, but he had never been approached by the mystical silver fox in an instant. He had never been so close to him without being aware of it. What a powerful magic formation! What a powerful sword! The 3 ultimate formation really deserved its reputation. Chapter 959. As soon as Li Yundong stepped into the 3 ultimate formation, he felt the huge power of the formation for the first time. Seeing that the 2 sharp swords were about to penetrate his body, he immediately flipped his 10 fingers and flicked them firmly on the bodies of the 2 long swords. Awesome! The strength of Li Yundong's fingers seemed to be light, but in fact, it was like a mountain-splitting axe. With just a light touch, the sword swung away with a clang. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's bodies shook and they were sent flying far away in an instant. Li Yundong said in a deep voice, Deng Yu, Deng Jiao, don't you recognize me at all? Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were shaken away by Li Yundong, and the qi and blood in their chests were rolling. When Deng Jiao heard Li Yundong's words, she immediately relaxed a little. Her eyes were a little confused in an instant, and she no longer looked cold and murderous. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who were standing to one side, were sisters. The 2 of them were connected. The elder sister's mind was shaken, and the younger sister's reaction was naturally a little slow. Li Yundong's eyes were sharp, and he immediately noticed Deng Jiao's abnormality. He was also keenly aware that the attack in the magic formation did not come immediately. His heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to call out Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's names again, he suddenly saw that Deng Jiao had come to her senses at this time. Her eyes focused again, and her 2 cold eyes were like ice knives. When she stared at him, it was like an ice knife went straight into his body, making him feel cold all over. A long sword suddenly jumped up in front of Li Yundong. The long sword had originally been stuck in the ground, but at this time, it jumped into the air. Next to the long sword, a misty human figure slowly appeared. This person was tall and burly, and he could vaguely recognize that he was a male Taoist priest. He wore a Taoist hat, held a long sword in one hand, and pinched his fingers with the other. His clothes fluttered like a sword immortal, and he rushed straight toward Li Yundong. At this time, Li Yundong was in this stone cave. The corridor was narrow, and it was difficult to hide. Although there were bursts of fluorescence in front of him, the fluorescence was actually not conspicuous. He could only vaguely see the shape of a long sword. Further in was deep and thick darkness, and only by moving forward could he see it clearly. Li Yundong knew that he couldn't hide, so he made a big hand seal and slapped at the sword immortal. Even the other 4 wisdom kings had to retreat from his palm, not daring to face it head-on. However, after the sword immortal was hit by this palm, his whole body dissipated, and the long sword was shaken away. But soon, it gathered again not far away, turned into a sword immortal, and went straight to Li Yundong. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the triple ultimate array was relying on the rich spiritual qi that Mount Longhu had accumulated over thousands of years to support the sword immortal's primordial spirit, preventing it from being destroyed. In the middle of the Eastern Han Dynasty, Zhang Daoling had been refining pills in Mount Longhu. After that, almost all the ancestors of Xueqi school had cultivated here. The strength of the spiritual qi accumulated over thousands of years was really unimaginable, especially the rich spiritual qi, which was almost endless, inexhaustible and inexhaustible. The reason why golden immortals were powerful was that they had understood the truth of heaven and earth. Everything in the world was just a variety of energy in their eyes. They could use the power of their own universe to resonate with the universe, thereby borrowing the power of heaven and earth for their own use. Therefore, every move they made had earth-shattering power. But the reason why the triple ultimate array was so powerful was that as soon as anyone entered the array, they would immediately be cut off from the outside world. Cultivators could no longer borrow the power of the universe. Even their own universe could resonate with the universe and reach the realm of the unity of heaven and man. When Li Yundong first entered the array, he felt that it was dark in front of him, as if he had entered another world. At first, he didn't feel anything unusual, but when he repelled 2 attacks and took a deep breath, he immediately noticed that something was wrong. Li Yundong only felt that although his Naiden was supplying a large amount of Xueqi and spiritual power, when he breathed, he did not absorb any of the spiritual energy between heaven and earth. At his level of cultivation, every breath he took was a form of cultivation, and he could absorb the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Only in this way could his magic power and true essence grow and multiply endlessly. But just now, he did not feel any spiritual chi gathering in his body. This meant that he could only rely on his own magic power and true essence to fight against the powerful arrays in the 3 ultimate great array. The power of the array came from heaven and earth. Although Li Yundong was a golden immortal, if he only used his own strength to fight, his strength would be exhausted. No matter how powerful a person was, how could he compete with the vast and majestic power of heaven and earth? Li Yundong's face changed. In an instant, another wave of attacks rushed toward him. Every time he took a step, a long sword would jump up beside him, and a sword immortal holding a long sword would appear. Each of these sword immortals had the strength of a golden immortal, and they were extremely fierce in the array. The edge of the long sword emitted a strange light. As long as it touched Li Yundong's body-protecting Jinshin, it could immediately penetrate him. Li Yundong gritted his teeth and struck out again. This time, the spiritual power and Xueqi of his palm were so thick and condensed that it seemed to be solid. It was like a golden palm of flesh slapping in front of him. Several sharp swords in front of him stabbed at him, and he could even see the dents and traces of the swords piercing straight into Li Yundong's palm. Li Yundong saw that after the big handprint was split by the 2 sword immortals from the left and right, it did not stop moving. It split into 2 sides and chopped down toward his shoulders. His body didn't move, and in an instant, 2 arms appeared on his shoulders. It was the incarnation of the Jinshin Yang spirit, and it blasted toward the 2 golden immortals. Although the cauldron of the human body could produce a temporary change through the internal organs and the circulation of blood and qi, it could not be like the golden body of Yang spirit, which could be ever-changing, long or short. Li Yundong's 2 arms seemed to be the same as ordinary arms, but the moment they were thrown out, they suddenly increased in size. They hit the bodies of the 2 sword immortals on the left and right, and in an instant, they were blown into countless pieces. But as soon as they were smashed, the figures of the 2 sword immortals gathered together in an instant. Li Yundong took a step forward with the bombardment, and then another sword jumped out with a clang. In an instant, another sword immortal appeared with a long sword in his hand. Li Yundong took a deep breath and thought to himself, the deeper I go into this magic formation, the greater the pressure and the greater the power. If I turn around and run out at this time, I wonder if I can escape? As soon as this thought came to his mind, Li Yundong was shocked. He suddenly realized that the most terrible thing about the Sanju formation was not only that it could block the top masters from sensing and merging with heaven and earth, but also that it could put a strong psychological pressure on the people who entered the formation. As long as the people who entered the formation had the idea of escaping and put it into practice, it was equivalent to destroying their Taoist heart, and the Sanju formation would instantly kill Li Yundong. For a cultivator, there was nothing more terrible than the destruction of their Taoist heart. Li Yundong forcibly suppressed this idea. He took a deep breath with a hiss, which was long and full, as if he wanted to suck out all the air in the cave in one breath. He shouted, stamped his feet, and rushed into the depths of the cave like a cannonball. Since he couldn't retreat, he might as well go forward. As soon as Li Yundong moved, countless precious swords that had been used by the ancestors of the Xueqi school jumped out of the cave. They shone in the air of the cave, like a bright galaxy of sword rain. When Zi Yuan broke through the formation, there was no Deng Yu and Deng Jiao presiding over it. Just the automatic attack of the divine sword in the formation had almost killed her. At this time, with the 2 powerful sword souls, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, presiding over it, the power of the formation had multiplied by a terrifying amount. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao stood in the river formed by the long swords. Their movements, thoughts and eyes were almost the same. At this time, they no longer needed to take the initiative to attack Li Yundong, because they were the masters of the formation. The power of the formation would be based on the 2 of them to instigate the attack. Li Yundong took a step forward more than 10 meters. Just as he was about to take another step forward, he saw a sudden flash of silver light in front of him, and countless precious swords rushed toward him. These swords were densely packed, like a torrent of mountain torrents, and also like a steel meat grinder. Anything that touched its edge would be instantly crushed into powder. Li Yundong's shoulders and his own 2 arms quickly pinched the immovable Wisdom King's fundamental seal, and with an extremely astonishing speed, instantly shot out countless large handprints in front of him, as if erecting a glittering golden Buddha wall. As soon as these swords collided with the Buddha wall, there was a dull sound, and the stone cave buzzed. These countless swords were like soldiers charging into the formation, suddenly hitting the hard city gate of the city. They rushed forward one after another, squeezing each other. The long swords in front were even bent and made a creaking sound, which made people's hair stand on end. At this time, Li Yundong's hair stood on end, and the blood in his body was boiling. The bones in his body kept making cracking sounds, as if the sky had collapsed and he was holding up the sky with one arm. This force was really too strong. Although Li Yundong could block it for a while, because the power of his unity of heaven and man was blocked by the magic formation, he could only rely on the power of his own universe to compete with the strong magic formation. However, the power of the magic formation came from heaven and earth. The 3 ultimate formations in the world and the immortal killing formation were the most terrifying top-level magic formations. Whether it was the old ancestors of the 3 pure ones or Buddha Tathagata, they didn't dare to enter the formation alone. Only when several top experts joined forces and used the power of top-level treasures did they dare to enter the formation. Li Yundong broke into the array alone. He really didn't know what to do. His feet were pressed into the hard rock ground by the terrifying force of the magic array. It was as if there was a quagmire under his feet, and his body was pushed to the ground, leaving a gully. Li Yundong was shocked, and an ominous thought flashed through his mind. But he soon thought of something and shouted at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao again. Deng Yu, Deng Jiao. It doesn't matter if you don't remember me. Do you still remember young Master He? As soon as Li Yundong shouted, Deng Yu's body trembled violently. The sword formation in front of Li Yundong, which was like a wild dragon, disappeared without a trace in an instant. Chapter 960. As the sword soul in the Sanju magic formation, Deng Jiao's every move, thought would affect the power and function of the magic formation. When she was called by Li Yundong, she was so shocked that countless memories appeared in her mind in an instant. Please remember me. These images included the scene when she had just met Li Yundong at school, the nightmarish memory of meeting young Master He in the hotel, and some extremely hazy memories of being reborn in the lotus pond hidden deep in her mind. In the previous magic formation, Deng Jiao had not been completely covered by the divine senses and thoughts of the immortals invited by the god-inviting spell. It was like a big dam that looked strong and majestic, but in fact, it was empty and had many loopholes. This was the principle of a dam of 1,000 miles being destroyed by an ant's nest. Deng Jiao had a very deep impression of Li Yundong, and it could even be said that he was one of the people who had left the deepest impression on her in the world. At the same time, Li Yundong shouted young Master He's name, and young Master He was also one of the people who had left the deepest impression on her in this world. When the two of them combined, they immediately broke through the big dam full of loopholes. Deng Jiao's eyes were confused, and she had a splitting headache. She couldn't help but cover her head and moan in pain. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were both twin sisters, so they naturally felt the same as their elder sister. Their minds and divine senses were also greatly affected, and they also covered their heads in pain. The Sanju magic formation was suddenly paralyzed, and all the sword immortals disappeared in an instant. The long swords that had been floating in the air like the Milky Way also floated in the air again. All the pressure around Li Yundong suddenly disappeared. He found that although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao had similar reactions, the elder sister, Deng Jiao, was the most intense. He immediately continued and shouted at Deng Jiao. Deng Jiao, don't you want to take revenge on young Master He? He once caused you to fall from a building and die. Don't you want him to get what he deserves? This sentence touched the deepest pain in Deng Jiao's heart. The reason why she was willing to stay in Mount Longhu to continue cultivating was that, on the one hand, she felt that she had been reborn by Zhongling, Zhou Ping, and the others and wanted to find an opportunity to repay their kindness. On the other hand, she felt that she had died once and was destined to be with the Zhengyi school. At a young age, she had a mind that could see through the world of mortals and was willing to cultivate here. At the same time, Her hatred and fear for young Master He were deeply buried in her heart. This kind of fear originated from the fear of power among grassroots girls, and it also originated from the deep-rooted ideology of officials in China. The so-called people should not fight with officials. Although Deng Jiao was usually quiet and introverted, while her sister was lively and extroverted, in reality, the one who really made the decision was her sister, Deng Jiao. She knew very well that if young Master He knew that the two of them were not dead, he would definitely think of a way to silence them. He might even harm his family. Therefore, she had never thought of going down the mountain to look for her parents, nor did she think of a way to contact her friends. She just waited quietly on the mountain with her sister, endured, cultivated silently, and accumulated their own strength. Especially when the two of them heard that Li Yundong, their former good friend and classmate, had also become the most famous cultivator in the cultivation world, the confidence and will in the depths of their hearts became much firmer. Deng Jiao didn't know that young Master He had been smashed into powder by Li Yundong. At first, she subconsciously muttered to herself, "Young Master He, young Master He." But the more she muttered, the brighter her eyes became, and the more intense the hatred in them became. In the end, Deng Jiao's delicate and pretty face became murderous. She asked sternly, "Young Master He? Where is young Master He? I want him to die." Seeing that Deng Jiao had already remembered many things, Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. He said softly, "Deng Jiao, young Master He is dead. Do you still remember who I am?" Young Master He is dead?" When Deng Jiao suddenly heard the news, it was as if she had gathered all her strength but didn't know where to put it. Her eyes were suddenly filled with confusion as she looked at Li Yundong in confusion. But soon, her eyes focused again, and her face showed a trace of surprise and timidity. You are Li Yundong?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing and said, "Thank God, you finally know me." At this time, Deng Jiao had completely recovered from the control of the God-inviting technique. She looked at Li Yundong in surprise and joy. Just as she was about to speak, a figure suddenly flashed beside her. It was her sister struggling and pouncing on Li Yundong with a fierce roar. The surrounding swords once again became covetous, and the tips of the swords pointed at Li Yundong, eager to have a try. Deng Jiao was shocked and quickly shouted, "Sister, he is Li Yundong. Don't you know him?" Deng Yu's divine sense soul had not been completely dispersed. Her mind had only been seriously affected by her sister, Deng Jiao, so her thinking speed and physical speed had greatly decreased. However, after all, there was still a complete divine sense soul of the Xueqi school in her body. Although it was shaken, it had not been completely dispersed. Therefore, Deng Yu still had a strong hostility. When she heard Deng Jiao's cry, her divine sense soul in her body subconsciously woke up in an instant. Her eyes were confused and she stayed where she was, but soon her eyes became like lightning. She stared at Deng Jiao and shouted harshly. Her voice was old in vicissitudes. It was clearly the voice of an old woman. As a disciple of the Xueqi school, you actually want to cooperate with outsiders and help them? Don't you feel ashamed of your grandmaster and your master? These words were harsh, making Deng Jiao feel suffocated and ashamed. She subconsciously lowered her head. When Li Yundong saw this, he immediately understood that it was absolutely impossible for him to break the Sanju formation with his own strength. In the past, the three top masters, Ancestor Bodhi, Taishang Laojun, and Heavenly Primogenitor, had worked together with many powerful magical weapons to break the immortal slaying formation. Today, the power of the Sanju formation was definitely no less than that of the immortal slaying formation. It was also a magic formation that the Xueqi school had painstakingly built for many years. Although Li Yundong was the reincarnated Wisdom King, it was simply impossible for him to break the formation alone. If he wanted to break the formation today, it would definitely be a matter of kung fu beyond poetry. Therefore, Li Yundong immediately said to Deng Jiao, "Deng Jiao, don't you want to know how young Master He died? What happened to you and your sister Deng Yu after you fell from the hotel and your souls were destroyed?" Li Yundong's voice was calm and soft, like warm water, making the fear and shame in Deng Jiao's heart gradually disappear. She raised her head and asked curiously, "Li Yundong, do you know?" After saying this, her heart suddenly skipped a beat. She let out a cry and asked, "Could it be that you killed young Master He?" Li Yundong looked at Deng Jiao with emotion and slowly told her what had happened that day. When he said that he had seen Deng Yu and Deng Jiao being forced to fall from a building and die one after another by young Master He had been so angry that he had chased after the car with his legs. Deng Jiao's eyes suddenly flashed, and she looked at Li Yundong gratefully and emotionally. Even Deng Yu, who had wanted to attack Li Yundong before, stopped at this time. There was some struggle on her face, and her eyes were sometimes cold and sometimes confused. But when Li Yundong said that he had caught up with young Master He, disregarding the might of the thunder punishment, and killed young Master He in a rage, not only did Deng Jiao let out a cry of surprise and cover her mouth with her hand, even Deng Yu was suddenly moved. As if she had gotten to know Li Yundong again, she looked at him up and down seriously. Li Yundong talked all the way. He was very eloquent, and when he talked about his own things, it really made people feel like they were there and empathize. He talked about the separation between him and Su Chan and Zi Yuan's selfless sacrifice for him. Finally, when he talked about how Zi Yuan had resolutely decided to come to Mount Longhu to steal the sun and moon flowing elixir in order to help him and Su Chan, Li Yundong let out a long sigh. He couldn't help putting his palms together and saying, Deng Yu, Deng Jiao, no matter whether you still think of me as a friend or not, or whether you still think of us as classmates, I just want to ask you to open the net and show mercy to Zi Yuan. If I can't save her today, from now on, no one will be able to save her. Li Yundong said emotionally, Zi Yuan is the most reasonable, understanding, kind, and perfect woman I have ever met. She would rather hurt herself than hurt others. Do you have the heart to see such a good woman like her buried in such a living grave for the rest of her life? Buddha said, compassion is the most important thing. Tao ancestor said, all things have feelings. Although we cultivators pay attention to getting rid of the 5 emotions and jumping out of the cage, we are all flesh and blood after all. As long as we are not plants, birds, and beasts, who can really have no feelings at all? I, Li Yundong, have never begged anyone since I was a child, even if I was down and out, unknown, and humble. But today, I beg you, let Zi Yuan go and give her a way out. If there is any danger, let me bear it alone. As Deng Jiao listened, her eyes were filled with tears. She subconsciously turned her head to look at her sister, only to see that the hostility in her sister's eyes had long disappeared without a trace. Her divine sense had completely recovered. At this time, tears were streaming down her face. She kept wiping away her tears and sobbing softly. The long swords that were originally floating around her had fallen to the ground at this time, and the terrifying power of the Triple Ju formation had disappeared without a trace. Deng Jiao also wiped away her tears. She forced a smile and said, Li Yundong, I know. Go and save Zi Yuan and take her away. Li Yundong looked at Deng Yu, but Deng Yu wiped away her tears, turned her head, and said in a choked voice, go quickly. My face is all ruined from crying. Li Yundong, you are so annoying. Li Yundong smiled and looked into the depths of the magic circle. He saw that without the cover of the long river of sword rain, Zi Yuan's figure was faintly visible in the depths of the cave. Li Yundong moved and immediately flashed to Zi Yuan's side. He saw that Zi Yuan's eyes were closed tightly, and she was still in the final posture. It was as if her whole body had been sealed in meditation, and she was motionless. Li Yundong didn't dare to stay in this terrifying magic formation any longer. He carried Zi Yuan on his back and rushed out of the cave. Only when he passed by Deng Yu and Deng Jiao did he stop and say to them, why don't you go together? Otherwise, won't you be punished according to the rules of the sect if you stay? Deng Yu was delighted. Just as she was about to speak, Deng Jiao shook her head slightly and said softly, no, I will bear the consequences of my own actions. What's more, Master is very good to us. She won't do anything to us. Li Yundong, you'd better go quickly, in case something bad happens. Li Yundong was indeed a little afraid of staying in the Sanju formation. Although he was invincible in a one-on-one fight, that was outside the magic formation. No one in the world dared to say that he was still invincible in the Sanju formation. Therefore, he was also afraid that trouble would suddenly arise. Especially when he saw that Deng Jiao was serious and determined, he felt relieved and said, if you need anything, I will definitely come to help you. Or if you are not in the Zhengyi school one day, you can come to me. Okay. Deng Yu looked at her sister, Deng Jiao, eagerly. Deng Jiao smiled slightly and said, okay, it's a deal. Li Yundong smiled and nodded to the two of them. His figure flashed, and he turned into a blue light and flew away with Zi Yuan on his back. Alas, I've finally returned to Suzhou from Hong Kong and Shenzhen. I'm so tired. Chapter 961. The moment Li Yundong flew out, Zhang Ling, who was outside the cave, flew in almost at the same time and brushed past Li Yundong. She turned her head and stared at Li Yundong's disappearing figure, her whole body trembling slightly. Zhang Ling turned her face and said to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao in a trembling voice, You too. Are you crazy? Do you know what you've done? Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other. There was a trace of fear on Deng Yu's face, but Deng Jiao knelt on the ground with a thud and said softly, Master, I've been wondering why we were resurrected in Mount Longhu after we died. We once asked you and eldest sister Zhou Ping, but every time we asked you about these things, you either didn't explain it in detail or were very unhappy. Now I understand. It must have been Li Yundong and Zi Yuan who saved us, right? Since our lives were saved by you, we'll return them to them now. Moreover, it was my idea to let them go, and we have been deeply indebted to Master these days. If there is any punishment today, just take it out on me. At this time, Deng Yu also hurriedly knelt down and said, No, it has nothing to do with you. I made the decision to let them go. Seeing that the two of them had taken the initiative to fight for the blame, Zhang Ling couldn't help but roar angrily, Bullsh*T, it's all Bullsh*T. Do you know what you've done? After that, she raised her hand and wanted to slap Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. But as soon as she moved, she suddenly heard a dignified voice buzzing around her. It was clearly Zhang Tianchu's voice. Xueqi. Zhang Ling's figure suddenly stopped. She looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao angrily, as if she had expected better from them. In the end, she stomped her feet, let out a long sigh, and turned to leave, leaving Deng Yu and Deng Jiao kneeling in the stone cave. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao knew that they had made a big mistake, so they didn't dare to get up. They kept kneeling like this, not even daring to raise their heads. After a long time, they heard a voice in their ears. It was Zhang Tianchu. How long are you two going to kneel like this? Deng Yu and Deng Jiao trembled and immediately raised their heads. The two of them looked at each other, and Deng Yu rushed to say, Sect leader martial uncle, don't blame big sister, this is my... Before she could finish, she was interrupted by Deng Jiao. Deng Jiao said, No, sect leader martial uncle, if you want to punish someone, punish me. The two of them fought over the blame, fearing that Celestial Master Zhang would punish them in a fit of rage. Celestial Master Zhang was silent for a while. Suddenly he chuckled and asked, Do you also know that you were wrong? Deng Yu was terrified, but Deng Jiao's expression was calm. Both of them whispered at the same time, We know our wrongs. Celestial Master Zhang asked gently, What did you do wrong? The two sisters looked at each other. Deng Yu said in a low voice, We shouldn't have colluded with outsiders. Deng Jiao said, We should have failed to live up to the expectations of Shifu and sect leader Shu. Celestial Master Zhang chuckled and said, Working together from inside and outside? Isn't it a matter of course for you to repay the favor you owe others? Why did he feel that he was wrong? As for feeling that you have failed to live up to our expectations, that's not necessary. If you are cultivating for us, you can go down the mountain today. I believe that your Shifu will let you go. At first, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were a little surprised. They thought to themselves, Sect leader Shu is not angry with us? But when they heard what he said, the two of them bent down in fear and whispered, Sect leader Shu, please calm down. We know we were wrong. Don't drive us away. Celestial Master Zhang said slowly, Do you two know what cultivation is? Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other again. They had only cultivated for a short time, and Zhang Ling was a busy person. She was responsible for the daily chores of the Xueqi school. Sometimes when she was busy, she would hit the back of the head with her heels. She didn't even have much time to cultivate. Her cultivation stopped at the top of the Yang spirit, and her disciple was only at the Yang spirit level. In terms of cultivation in the Xueqi school, she was really not the best at all. Therefore, how could a person like Zhang Ling have the time and energy to teach them to cultivate? Even a reincarnated wisdom king like Li Yundong, who had great determination, great wisdom, and great understanding, was thanks to Zi Yuan, who was both a teacher and a friend, constantly guiding him on the road ahead. In addition, his own personal opportunities and miraculous luck had allowed him to become the invincible Li in the future. Although Deng Yu and Deng Jiao's luck was extraordinary, it was much worse than the two transformations of the Renyuan Jindan and the Diyuan Jindan. Especially on the road of cultivation, if there was no master to personally take care of them, it was absolutely impossible for them to have great cultivation and understand the true meaning of cultivation. Therefore, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao panicked and said timidly, "Sect leader Xueqi, please give us some advice." Celestial Master Zhang said, "The so-called cultivation is to get rid of the false and retain the true. You too got rid of the false thoughts in your hearts, kept the true thoughts, and did good deeds. This is a matter of great merit. How can I be angry?" Deng Yu was overjoyed when she heard this. She jumped up and looked in the direction of the voice. "Sect leader Xueqi, are you really not angry with us?" Deng Jiao, who was standing to one side, quickly pulled her hand and asked her to kneel down again. However, Deng Yu bowed her head and winked at her with a cheeky smile on her face. Deng Yu was not happy for long before she heard Celestial Master Zhang say, "There's no need to be angry, but the country has its laws, and the sect has its dogma. Punishment is inevitable." Deng Yu's face immediately fell. With a drooping face, she knelt on the ground with a thud. She looked at her sister, Deng Jiao, and said in a low voice, "Then sect leader Xueqi, please punish us." Celestial Master Zhang chuckled and said, "Based on the crimes you two have committed, you should be confined for at least 10 years. But now there is an uninvited guest next to the Fengchen stone on the side peak of the Linggong sect. It's not convenient for me to see her, but she is holding a powerful magical weapon that should have belonged to our Xueqi school. You two go there and bring this powerful magical weapon back to me, and I won't punish you." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were overjoyed at the same time and asked in unison, "Who is it? What powerful magical weapon?" Celestial Master Zhang didn't answer, but asked, "Don't you want to know if the two of you can beat her?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were young and naive. When they heard this, they suddenly stopped and looked at each other awkwardly. Deng Yu said in a low voice, "Sect leader Xueqi, since you want us to deal with her, I think both of us should be able to deal with her, right? You won't let us die, will you?" In the end, the little girl played a petty trick and used words to provoke the leader of the Xueqi school. This kind of little girl's thoughts immediately made Celestial Master Zhang smile. "Don't worry, this trip will be more daunting than dangerous. Although according to seniority, she should be your senior, and her cultivation is far higher than yours, there will be someone to help you. But remember, you must bring that powerful magical weapon back. If this powerful magical weapon falls into the hands of someone with evil intentions, there will be endless troubles in the future." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao listened to Celestial Master Zhang's casual words at first, but his last two sentences were extremely serious. They couldn't help but look serious and said in unison, "Sect leader Xueqi, don't worry. We'll go now. Sect leader Xueqi, please tell us what this powerful magical weapon is like. What's its name?" Celestial Master Zhang was silent for a while, then said word by word, "This powerful magical weapon is called the Glass Mirror of Heaven." While Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were fighting with Li Yundong in the cave, on the other side, on the tourist bus of Tiannan University, the students of Tiannan University were chatting and laughing. The past few days of travel had left a deep impression on them. Although Mount Longhu was not a particularly fun place for them, and many of them had even been to many foreign tourist attractions, it was the first time that thousands of people had gone on such a wild trip outside. Many people even became lovers because of this opportunity. Therefore, almost all the students of Tiannan University were very excited during this trip. They whispered to each other, talked and laughed. But there were also some exceptions, such as Sun Li of the Student Union. At this time, she was collapsed in her seat on the bus, her whole body looking like it was about to collapse. Li Yundong had launched this event with great heroism, and the people around him admired him for spending a lot of money on it. But although he was only the initiator of the idea, almost all of the specific matters had fallen on the Student Union of Tiannan University. As one of the most favored successors of the Student Council, Sun Li was naturally the one with the heaviest workload. Unlike Zhou Qin, who was a cultivator with an incomparably strong physical body and spirit, she was just a mortal made of flesh and blood. For the past few days, she had not been able to rest a single day. Countless tasks had been assigned to her, and she was so busy that she was overloaded. Only now did she finally heave a sigh of relief. But just as she was resting, her phone suddenly rang again. Sun Li glanced at the phone and saw that it was a call from one of her best friends in the student union. She picked up the phone and said weakly, "Hello? If you have something to say, report it. If not, dismiss the court." The voice on the other side of the phone was extremely anxious. Bull**T. You're still in the mood to joke around? Sunli sat up immediately. What happened? She asked anxiously. The voice on the other side of the phone was almost shouting at the top of her lungs. Yanhua is missing. Sunli's heart skipped a beat. Her eyes widened. When thousands of students were traveling together, the most difficult thing to manage was managing their movements. The slightest mistake could lead to an embarrassing situation where they got lost, especially when there were many students who, on a whim, would form groups of 3 or 5 to explore Mount Longhu on their own. It was rare for them to get lost and disappear. Sunli had been tormented for a long time. But Sunli had never imagined that something like this would happen to the current student union president. She was both shocked and angry. She couldn't help but raise her voice. How could this be? Her voice was sharp and clear. The driver jumped in fright and instinctively slammed on the brakes. The students on the bus were also frightened into silence. All of them turned to look at Sunli. Sunli listened to the conversation on the phone for a while. After hanging up, she raised her head and looked left and right. Stop the car. Stop the car. She yelled in a flustered and exasperated voice. Someone's been left behind. Sunli. Our car has already stopped, one of her classmates whispered to her in a timid voice. Then hurry up and drive it back. Sunli yelled in annoyance. Chapter 962. Li Yundong flew out of the Sanju formation with Zi Yuan on his back. Before long, Li Yundong heard a soft whisper coming from behind him. Put me down. Please remember me. Li Yundong was overjoyed. He turned his head and said, Zi Yuan, are you awake? Zi Yuan's face was a little pale. She leaned her head gently on Li Yundong's shoulder and repeated softly, Put me down. Although Zi Yuan's voice was soft, it revealed a sense of determination. He couldn't help but be stunned. He stopped and said, Zi Yuan, it's me. Zi Yuan said in a low voice, I know. Li Yundong, put me down. Li Yundong respected Zi Yuan very much, so he immediately landed. The place under his feet was still the green Mount Longhu. The two of them landed here, surrounded by tall pines, rugged rocks, and green grass under the stone trees. It was full of spring. There was a stream flowing down where they landed. Li Yundong carefully placed Zi Yuan beside a rock and said to her, What's wrong with you? Are you okay? Zi Yuan raised her eyes and looked at Li Yundong. Her lips moved slightly, as if she wanted to say something, but she quickly swallowed it back. Although she didn't know what had happened before, she was an extremely smart person. She could guess what was going on. She sighed in her heart and whispered softly, Master, you were right again. Your psalms are all right. He really came back to life. All my efforts were not in vain. But, what do you mean by the last round? Zi Yuan sat quietly on a low stone. She lowered her eyes, and her long eyelashes trembled gently. Her gaze was distant, and she stared at a blade of grass struggling to get out of the crack in the stone. She was lost in thought. She didn't ask how Li Yundong had come back to life, nor did she ask why he had come to save her. She just sat quietly on the stone alone, as quiet as a painting and as elegant as a poem. Li Yundong didn't ask her how she had thought of going to the Sanju formation to snatch the sun and moon flowing elixir, nor did he ask her why she was sitting here silently and refused to leave. He just quietly accompanied her. The two of them seemed to have a tacit understanding. They silently accompanied each other, and neither of them asked a single question. It seemed that as long as the other was well, that was enough. Everything else became unimportant at this moment. After an unknown period of time, Zi Yuan's gaze slowly turned to the trickling stream next to her. She saw two figures reflected in the stream. The man was extraordinarily handsome, and the woman was as beautiful as a fairy. At first glance, they really looked like a pair of immortal lovers. Zi Yuan sighed softly in her heart. In the end, she raised her eyes and said to Li Yundong, I'm a little thirsty. Seeing that she had finally spoken, Li Yundong couldn't help but feel relieved. He smiled and said, Wait a minute, I'll go get some water for you. He quickly walked to the stream. Just as he was about to bend down, he suddenly felt a slight wind coming from behind him. Li Yundong turned his head and saw that Zi Yuan had disappeared. Only the green grass beside the stone was still swaying gently. Li Yundong was shocked. He immediately turned his Jin Xinyang spirit into countless doppelgangers and scattered them in all directions. In an instant, he sensed Zi Yuan's whereabouts. He moved and caught up with her. He caught up with Zi Yuan, grabbed her hand and said loudly, "Zi Yuan, where are you going?" Seeing that she couldn't escape, Zi Yuan struggled hard and said, "Let go." Li Yundong held her tightly and pulled her to the ground. His cultivation was far higher than Zi Yuan's. With this pull, Zi Yuan, a master of thunder retribution, had no choice but to follow him to the ground. She turned her head, her eyes full of tears, and said, "Li Yundong, who are you to me? What does it have to do with you where I go?" Li Yundong was shocked when he heard this, and he couldn't help but loosen his grip on Zi Yuan's hand. However, he felt that the moment Zi Yuan withdrew her hand, he held it tightly again. Li Yundong said slowly and seriously, "Zi Yuanj. In my heart, you are my teacher, my friend and my confidant. You know I don't want you to leave." Zi Yuan's eyes were fixed on Li Yundong, and she unconsciously became infatuated. After a long time, she lowered her eyes, and a tear fell involuntarily from the corner of her eye. She said softly, "Is it my teacher's friend and confidant? Is there nothing else?" As soon as Zi Yuan finished speaking, her heart began to beat wildly. Even she could not believe that she had actually said such a thing. After she finished speaking, she regretted it. A layer of beautiful red spread across her neck at an astonishing degree. It was so charming and moving that it was intoxicating. Li Yundong's heart was also pounding when he heard this. For a moment, even with his cultivation, he couldn't help but feel thirsty. He was at a loss and didn't know what to say. At this time, Zi Yuan was afraid and panicked. She was afraid that Li Yundong would say something. If he said something she didn't want to hear, what should she do? But deep in her heart, she was worried about another problem that she was even more afraid of. If he didn't say what she wanted to hear, what should she do? The goddess Banxian, who was usually wise and calm, was panicking at this time. She wanted to escape immediately, but her feet seemed to have taken root and she stood firmly in place. Just like that, one of them lowered his eyes and scanned the ground with a fearful gaze, like a frightened deer waiting for something. The other's gaze was conflicted and confused. He stood there in a daze, not moving, not saying a word. After an unknown period of time, Zi Yuan saw that he still did not say anything that made her feel uneasy, nor did he say the words that she had faintly hoped for in the depths of her heart. She couldn't help but sigh silently in her heart and slowly raise her head. However, she had regained her usual calm face. Zi Yuan said softly, "Li Yundong, let go." Li Yundong was very anxious and suddenly said in a very rude and overbearing manner, "No, you can't go." Zi Yuan stared at Li Yundong and smiled sadly. Her lips moved, wanting to say something heartless, but when the words were on the tip of her tongue, she couldn't say them. She knew that as long as she said these words, Li Yundong would not let her stay, and it would be possible for her to completely let go of this relationship. However, Zi Yuan asked herself. Ever since she had been led down the mountain by Ruan Hongling and entered the secular world to cultivate, she had met Li Yundong. After getting along with him for so many days, the two of them had gone through fire and water and saved each other countless times. Although this kind of relationship was not as vigorous as that between Li Yundong and Su Chan, it was also lingering. How could she let it go so easily? Zi Yuan's heart was full of worries. She had thought that she had seen through everything in the Sanju formation and let go of everything. But when she saw Li Yundong again and the enthusiasm and joy hidden in his eyes, her calm heart began to stir again. Zi Yuan stared at Li Yundong. After a long time, she sighed slowly and said, "Li Yundong, I want to see the Fengchen stone that Master left for me. Is that okay?" Seeing that she didn't mention leaving again, Li Yundong was relieved. He let go of her hand, smiled and said, "Okay, I'll go with you." Zi Yuan shook her head gently, sighed in a low voice, and walked up the mountain. When Li Yundong saw her going up the mountain, he was stunned. He looked around and found that the place where they were staying was the side peak where the Linggong sect was located. Li Yundong followed slowly behind Zi Yuan, talking to her from time to time along the way. He wanted to make her happy, but Zi Yuan was so worried that she couldn't laugh. Li Yundong talked for a while, but seeing that Zi Yuan still ignored him, he sighed and didn't say anything more. The two of them walked slowly along the mountain road. Before they reached the top of the mountain, they heard a cry. Zi Yuan stopped, and Li Yundong rushed to her side and whispered, "Who is it?" Zi Yuan frowned and said in a low voice, I don't know. It seems to be coming from the Fengchen stone. The two of them looked at each other and quickly and quietly walked a few steps forward. They hid in the forest and quietly looked outside. They were immediately shocked to see Yan Hua beside the wind dust stone, holding it and crying bitterly. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan looked at each other and were tongue-tied. Countless questions appeared in their minds. Why is Yan Hua here? Why is he crying here? While they were stunned, they heard Yan Hua crying, Xixiang, you are so heartless. You abandoned me and lied to me for 10 years for that B*TCH. 10 years. Xixiang. How many decades can a person live for? Do you know what I did when I thought you were dead? 10 years ago, everyone in the world said that you, Wang Yuanshan, were lustful and betrayed your sect. In order to give you an ordinary life, I abandoned my identity and body and turned into a fox demon that I hated the most. I lurked in the Fox Zen school, just wanting to avenge you and prove your innocence. But in the end, I found out that you didn't die. You faked your death for that B*TCH. Since you didn't die, why didn't you tell me? I've done so much for you. Why are you so heartless to me? You can die for her, but you won't say a few more words to me for me? Xixiang, you are really the most heartless man in the world. Yan Hua cried loudly, his tears pouring down like rain. His voice was high and shrill, and it did not sound like a man's voice at all. However, if it was a woman's voice, it would be coarse, and it would make one's hair stand on end. Zi Yuan and Li Yundong felt their hair stand on end when they heard his voice. They looked at each other with fear in their eyes and saw the horror in the depths of each other's hearts. Impossible. This is Yan Feng. Chapter 963. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan were two extremely smart people, but they had never expected that Yan Feng would become a person who was neither a man nor a woman. Their cultivation was high and their eyes were sharp, so they could see the general trend. But when they heard Yan Feng say such words in Yan Hua's body, their minds raced like lightning, and they immediately understood all the key points. Please remember me. The two of them stared at each other, and Zi Yuan's expression was extremely strange. Although she had never had any deep feelings for Yan Feng, her Shu, she was still a member of the same sect and her master Shimi. She was also a close person who had watched her grow up. With these layers of relationships, it was difficult for her to be hostile to Yan Feng. Although Li Yundong had been enemies with Yan Feng several times, he felt that although Yan Feng's cultivation was not high, she was scheming and tenacious. She could hide in the dark for many years without doing anything. With such an enemy hiding in the dark to deal with her, it was really a little uneasy. As the saying goes, one can only be a thief for 1,000 days, but not guard against thieves for 1,000 days. When Li Yundong saw Yan Feng escape last time, he had an idea. At this time, when he saw Yan Feng appear again, she had turned into a man. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Among the female cultivators in the world, no one can compare to Yan Feng in terms of ruthlessness and forbearance. This woman is really terrifying. Fortunately, she is still one step away from the Jinshin. Otherwise, once she breaks through the Jinshin, it will be very annoying if she hides in the dark and makes things difficult for me. However, Zi Yuan looked at Yan Feng, who was neither a man nor a woman, holding a stone and crying bitterly about Wang Yuanshan's death. She felt sad and sighed in her heart. She immediately sent a voice transmission to Li Yundong and said, Li Yundong, Yan Feng has become neither a man nor a woman, and she has no relatives. Please be magnanimous and let her go. Li Yundong sighed and wrote on the ground, saying, Look at Yan Feng. Although she is now occupying the body of a man, in fact, her 6 senses have been removed. Her voice is feminine, and there is a trace of yin qi between her eyebrows. Obviously, she has lost her power and no longer has a yang root. Why do you think she's so cruel to herself? Zi Yuan suddenly stopped talking. She knew that the most terrible thing about a person was not her cruelty to her enemies, but her cruelty to herself. A person who could be so cruel to herself, what would she do to her enemies? Just thinking about it was enough to make one shudder. Zi Yuan sighed and shook her head secretly. Her brows were full of worry. Seeing her in such a dilemma, Li Yundong's heart couldn't help but soften. He wrote on the ground again, Well, for your sake, I'll let her go again. In the future, as long as her target is me and not the people around me, I'll let her go no matter how many times she comes, okay? Zi Yuan's eyes darted around, and she breathed a sigh of relief in her heart. She said via voice transmission, "Then I'll thank you on behalf of the Lingong sect. You've left some incense for our Lingong sect." Li Yundong wrote curiously and asked, "What do you mean? Aren't you the head of the Lingong sect?" Zi Yuan said via voice transmission, "I stole the sun and moon elixir, and you saved me from the Sanju formation. The Zhengyi school will definitely not swallow this. But they won't come to make trouble for you, because they definitely don't want to make another strong enemy like you now. But it's not necessarily the case for me. They won't take me back, but they will definitely expel me from the Zhengyi school and exempt me from inheriting the position of the head of the Lingong sect." As Zi Yuan spoke, her voice gradually became a little low and disappointed. Li Yundong sighed in his heart and wrote, "This is all because you wanted to save Meal. Don't worry, I will definitely seek justice for you." Zi Yuan shook her head and was about to speak when she suddenly heard Yan Feng, who was holding the stone and crying bitterly, suddenly stand up. She glared at Ao Wushuang, who had turned into a rock not far from the Fengchen stone, and said sternly, "It's all your fault, B*tch. When you were alive, you implicated my Shixiang. Now that you're dead, you won't let him go? You still have the face to stand by his side? Get out of here." Before Yan Feng returned to Mount Longhu, she had thought that Li Yundong had brought the students of Tiannan University to Mount Longhu just to throw a tantrum and play around, but she had never expected that there were so many secrets hidden behind it. She had been concentrating on cultivation these days and knew very little about the cultivation world, so she was a bit like a peach garden. If you don't know the Qin and Han dynasties, how can you talk about the Wei and Jin dynasties? If she hadn't inadvertently overheard the disciples of the Zhengyi school chatting in private when they were bored, she wouldn't have known that so many things had happened. She wouldn't have known that Wang Yuanshan had died for Ao Wushuang, and that Ao Wushuang had also followed him in front of the Fengchen stone. Yan Feng really hated Ao Wushuang to the bone. This fox demon had stolen her Shixiang, who had been her childhood sweetheart, when she was alive. After she died, she still refused to let him go? The more Yan Feng looked at the stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into, the redder her eyes became. Her anger rose from her heart, and she became bold. With a sharp roar, she rushed toward the stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into. Zi Yuan and Li Yundong, who were in the bushes, were shocked. Just as they were about to rush out, they suddenly saw two figures flash. It was Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, who had arrived hand in hand. As soon as Deng Yu and Deng Jiao landed on the ground, they saw a man with red eyes crying and rushing toward the stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into. They knew the origin of this stone. The sisters were not serious inner disciples, so they didn't have the sense of superiority of the disciples of famous sections. They thought that they were the only righteous ones in the world, and the others were all insignificant pawns, let alone a mere fox demon. Therefore, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao didn't mind Ao Wushuang's identity as a fox demon. They admired and respected her infatuation. At this time, seeing that Yan Hua wanted to smash the big stone that Ao Wushuang had turned into, they suddenly became furious and shouted in unison, "Stop!" Yan Feng stopped and turned around with red eyes. After looking Deng Yu and Deng Jiao up and down, she said in a cold voice, "Who are you two?" Deng Yu and Deng Jiao looked at each other. Deng Yu snorted and said, "You don't need to know who we are. Let me tell you, my master Zhongling once ordered that no one is allowed to damage this stone. Who are you? How dare you be so presumptuous in Mount Longhu?" Yan Feng looked up and laughed. Her laughter was sad. "Who am I? How many people in the world know who I am now? When I reunited with Shi Xiang here, even he didn't recognize me. Little girl, when I was cultivating in Mount Longhu, you weren't even born yet." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao didn't believe what Yan Feng had said. Deng Yu snapped, "Nonsense." Deng Jiao pressed Deng Yu's hand and said in a soft voice, "We don't care who you are, but Shu leader asked us to come to you to get something back." Yan Feng's voice gradually turned cold. She looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao unkindly and asked, "What is it?" Deng Yu rushed to say, "Do you have a very important powerful magical weapon on you? It's called the Mirror of Heaven and Earth?" This sentence shocked Yan Feng so much that her whole body trembled. She looked around in horror and saw that there was no one around. When she looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao again, her eyes suddenly became extremely fierce and sharp. She said sternly, "What did you say? What Mirror of Heaven and Earth? Who told you that? Was it Master Zhang? How did he know?" Deng Yu didn't know how terrifying and powerful Yan Fong was. He said carelessly, "It's good that you know. My Xueqi leader asked us to find you and get this powerful magical weapon back. This powerful magical weapon should have belonged to our Xueqi school. Now it should be returned to its rightful owner." Yan Fong couldn't help laughing angrily. Returned to its rightful owner? Good, good. What a good, returning the item to its rightful owner. I really want to see if you two little girls, who haven't even grown up yet, dare to fight with me? As the three of them were talking, Li Yundong and Zi Yuan, who were hiding in the bushes, were really stunned. After a long time, Li Yundong quickly wrote on the ground. It turns out that the mirror of heaven and earth was stolen by Yan Fong. I was wondering why someone got there before us last time when we went to get the powerful magical weapon according to the location your master had told us. Zi Yuan's heart was in turmoil. She said via voice transmission, "No wonder. It must have been Yan Fong who recognized master, and then master told her the location of the treasure. That's why Yan Fong took the mirror of heaven and earth one step ahead of us." Li Yundong wrote curiously and asked, "But I don't understand. Didn't you say that the mirror of heaven and earth is the best cultivation magical weapon in the world? Why is Yan Fong still only at the top level of the Yang spirit after taking this powerful magical weapon?" Zi Yuan shook her head and said via voice transmission, "I don't know either. Back then, master only told me that this powerful magical weapon was a top cultivation magical weapon. He didn't know how to use it or what magical effects it had, let alone me. But I guess it should be because the powerful magical weapon hasn't recognized its master yet. It may be the only powerful magical weapon that needs a special relationship to recognize its master." Li Yundong knew that the so-called only powerful magical weapon referred to the 7 billion people in the world. Only one person could make this powerful magical weapon recognize its master. Unless this person died, it was impossible for anyone else in the world to make this powerful magical weapon recognize its master, let alone awaken the magical power and effects of the powerful magical weapon. This kind of relationship was a bit like the relationship between the living Buddha's inheritance in Tibetan Buddhism. When a living Buddha was about to die, he would often tell his disciples where his next reincarnation spirit child was. His disciples would search for it according to the information provided by the living Buddha. This way, it would be passed down from generation to generation, and the incense would never end. Li Yundong felt strange and wrote on the ground, "The conditions for this powerful magical weapon to recognize its master are really a bit harsh." Zi Yuan said via voice transmission, "It's not harsh, but it's indeed very harsh. After all, the probability is 1 in 7 billion. But once it meets its destined master, this powerful magical weapon will recognize its master unconditionally. Moreover, as long as this person is not dead, even if anyone takes away the mirror of heaven and earth, it will be equivalent to holding an ordinary mirror. It will have no magical effect at all." Li Yundong nodded and continued to write on the ground. "Then I'll take this powerful magical weapon back and give it to you. This is the real return to its original owner." Zi Yuan sighed and said via voice transmission, "The characteristic of this powerful magical weapon is that the lower the cultivation of the person, the more valuable and useful it will be. For people like us who have broken through the Jinshin Thunder Retribution phase, the use of this powerful magical weapon is extremely limited. I wanted to take back this powerful magical weapon because I wanted you to use it to break through to a stronger realm. But now that you have achieved success and recognition, this powerful magical weapon is of little significance to you. For me, it's not so important." Li Yundong was about to continue writing on the ground when he saw Yan Fong had already shouted and pounced on Deng Yu and Deng Zhao. His heart skipped a beat and he was about to help when he suddenly heard another voice. It was the voice of a middle-aged man. The voice chuckled and said, "A dignified senior of the Linggong sect is bullying 2 little girls. Don't you feel ashamed?" Yan Fong shuddered and immediately froze. She looked sharply in the direction of the voice. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan also looked in the direction of the voice in surprise, only to see a middle-aged man in a gray Taoist robe slowly walking out. It was Yin Kong, who had led his disciples to force Li Sen to join the Shentian sect and coax Li Sen to join the Shentian sect. Chapter 964. Deng Yu and Deng Zhao had met Yin Kong before, so they naturally recognized this great enemy of the Zhengyi school. As soon as they saw Yin Kong appear, they immediately felt as if they were facing a great enemy. In the eyes of the sisters, Yin Kong was obviously a much greater threat than Yan Fong. Yan Fong naturally didn't recognize Yin Kong. She couldn't help but feel apprehensive when she saw Yin Kong appear and reveal strong hostility towards her. It was especially so when she saw the strong greed in his eyes. She regretted revealing the information about the Heaven Kuan Rui mirror too early. Although this mirror was a unique type of magic treasure, and only one person in the world could use it, everyone who didn't get their hands on this magic treasure would have the same thought. Why aren't I the one who can use this magic treasure? These days, Yin Kong had been hiding near Mount Longhu. His cultivation was quite high. He was a Jinshin master and the leader of the Shen sect. This was the golden time for cultivation. The others of the Xueqi school were focused on cultivation, so no one noticed that such a powerful enemy was lurking near Mount Longhu. In addition, the power of the Xueqi school in Mount Longhu was no longer the same as it had been in the heyday of the Song dynasty. At that time, there were tens of thousands of cultivators in the Xueqi school. If a fly flew into Mount Longhu, the Xueqi school would know whether it was male or female. Yin Kong had already received the order from Zhang Tianfang, the sect master of Shen sect. Although the disciples of Shen sect had left Mount Longhu, he himself remained at the foot of Mount Longhu, patiently waiting for Zhang Tianfang's prophecy to come true. When he went to Mount Longhu, Zhang Tianfang had made a prophecy to him in private. First, the internal strife of the Xueqi sect was about to occur, and the disaster would start from the Wall of Desolation. Second, there would be a great change in the Chinese cultivation world. First, there would be the rebirth of the Black Fox, and then there would be the chaos of the world. Although the reincarnation of Wisdom King would quell the disaster, although the latter also started from the reincarnation of Wisdom King, the final fulfillment would happen next to the Wind Dust Stone at the foot of Mount Longhu. At first, Yin Kong didn't understand what his senior brother sect master meant, but now he understood. While they were sects that spent most of their time overseas, they still paid close attention to the situation in the domestic cultivation world. During the founding of the People's Republic and the 10 years of turmoil, a large number of cultivators left the cultivation world. Some of them followed Old Jiang to Taiwan, while others went south to Southeast Asia, west to England, France, east to the United States, Canada, and other places. In the beginning, these people were all alone. In addition, they were Taoist forces. It was easy to imagine how difficult it would be to enter the powerful Christian capital. Because of this, the overseas sects had fought countless battles with the Western sects in private. Many Chinese cultivators had bled in foreign countries before they could finally establish their own sections. After paying an extremely heavy price, the elites of these sects took root in foreign countries. Although the environment was harsh and cruel, foreign cultivators had a unique and relaxed environment. It was not like the domestic and foreign countries, which seemed to be relaxed and free on the surface, but in reality, there were surveillance and restrictions everywhere. As the leader of the Shen sect, an overseas sect of the Xueqi school, Yin Kong had a very strong sense of mission and responsibility deep in his heart. He had already believed that the true method of the Chinese cultivation world had fallen, and that the Xueqi school was in a precarious situation, weak and decayed. It needed to be uprooted. Only complete destruction would be a new beginning. This was the dogma that Yin Kong believed in. Yin Kong naturally knew about the Yin Kuan Rui mirror and its magical effects. Even a blind man could see the strong greed in his eyes. This kind of eyes was clearly the eyes of a fanatical believer. Li Yundong understood this kind of eyes in an instant. Only in the Potala Palace in Tibet had he seen the believers burning their fingers to offer Buddha with the same kind of eyes. But what shocked Li Yundong and Zi Yuan the most was that although the eyes in his eyes were fanatical, there was always a trace of calmness and rationality in the depths of his eyes. A fanatical and self-controlled master was definitely the most difficult opponent to deal with. Li Yundong and Zi Yuan looked at each other, and Zi Yuan secretly said, "This person is ambitious, no less than an ambitious person than Wang Jinyuan. Do you want to make a move?" Li Yundong sighed in his heart and wrote on the ground, "The Chinese cultivation world is in turmoil, and ambitious people are emerging frequently. This is not a good thing. Let's see." Zi Yuan said, "The Shen sect is an overseas force of the Xueqi school. I once heard Master vaguely mention that the overseas forces are now very strong. It seems that the strength of the sect has far surpassed the strength of the Xueqi school in the country. I think it's better for you to wait and see. After all, this is an internal struggle of the Xueqi school." Li Yundong nodded and stayed by the side, watching quietly. Li Yunyang and Zi Yuan could control their temper, but Yan Feng really couldn't bear it. She only felt that Yin Kong's eyes were like a hunter staring at his prey, staring at her closely. Yan Fong felt a burst of fear in her heart. She subconsciously took a step back and said fiercely, "What do you want to do? Don't think that I'm afraid of you just because you're from the Xiantian sect." Yin Kong restrained the fanatical gaze in his eyes. He pretended to be kind and said to Deng Yu and Deng Zhao, "Don't be afraid. No matter what, we are all from the Zhengyi school. With me here she can't hurt you." As he said this, Yin Kong turned his head and looked at Yan Fong with a murderous look. "Did you hear what these two little sisters said just now? If you hand over the heaven and earth Rui mirror, I'll spare your life. What do you think?" Yan Fong's face changed. Although she couldn't use the heaven and earth Rui mirror herself, she couldn't hand it over even if she was killed. Yan Fong took another step back and sneered. "Do you think I'll take this powerful magical weapon with me?" Deng Yu and Deng Zhao hadn't expected that Yin Kong would jump out to help them at this time. Although the two little girls were young and had little experience, they were not stupid. They knew that Yin Kong was using their names to take it by force. The most important thing was that their reputation was not so important, but they had the Zhengyi school behind them. Although Deng Zhao wanted Yan Fong to hand over the heaven and earth Rui mirror, she also knew that she couldn't make a mistake at this critical juncture. The little girl took a step forward and said in a crisp voice, "Zhenren Yin Kong, on behalf of the whole Zhengyi school, I thank you for your kindness. But after all, this is an internal matter of our Zhengyi school, and we don't need your help here." Yin Kong didn't expect Deng Zhao to be so polite at such a young age. He was slightly surprised and said, "Oh? Which generation are you from? Who is your master?" Before Deng Zhao could speak, Deng Yu snorted and said, "We know you. You want to replace our Zhengyi school. Don't try to get close to us. We won't fall for it." Yin Kong didn't get angry. Instead, he laughed out loud. His eyes were filled with a strange light as he stared at the pair of beautiful sisters. It wasn't because he was bewitched by their beauty, but because he saw that they were both smart and talented. He wanted to kidnap them just like he did with Li San and trick them into becoming disciples of Xiantian sect. Yin Kong said with a smile, "Little girl, the Zhengyi school is not the only orthodox school in the world. Our sect leader Zhang Tianfang is also a direct descendant, the orthodox of the orthodox school." Deng Yu's words were quick and unforgiving. She said, "Yes, we were born of the same root. Why are you so eager to torture each other? Why are you being so aggressive again and again?" Yin Kong smiled, waved his hand, and said, "Little girl, I won't talk to you about this. Anyway, you won't understand. So, have you ever thought about abandoning the darkness for the light and coming to our Xiantian sect to cultivate?" Deng Yu said, "Bah, why don't you abandon the darkness for the light and return to the embrace of our Zhengyi school? As the saying goes, when the leaves fall back to their roots, the fox dies on the hill. Shouldn't you overseas wanderers do the same?" Seeing that his persuasion was useless, Yin Kong's face darkened slightly. He snorted and said, "You're so young, but you have a sharp tongue." He no longer looked at Deng Yu and Deng Zhao, but turned to Yan Fong. He sneered and said, "Why don't you hand over the mirror of heaven and earth?" Yan Fong's eyes were full of fear and vigilance. She sneered and said, "Do you think I'll take the mirror of heaven and earth with me? You want this powerful magical weapon? Stop dreaming." As she spoke, Yan Fong moved and immediately turned into a beam of cyan light and fled into the distance. Yin Kong's eyes flashed. With a flick of his finger, a small flying bug, which was hard to see with the naked eye, flew to Yan Fong and disappeared in an instant. When Deng Yu and Deng Zhao saw Yan Fong escape, they immediately became anxious and wanted to chase after her. However, as soon as they moved, Yin Kong stopped in front of them and said with a smile, "Two little girls, don't chase after her. Even if I catch up with you, you won't be able to defeat me. Why don't you come back to the Xiantian sect with me?" Deng Yu and Deng Zhao were shocked and angry. They said in unison, "What do you want to do?" Although Yin Kong had a strong desire for the mirror of heaven and earth, he also knew that it was very likely that Yan Fong would not take this powerful magical weapon with her. If he fought with her at this time, although there was an 80% chance that he could catch her, he might not be able to force out the whereabouts of the powerful magical weapon. It was very likely that he would alarm the masters of the Zhengyi school. He quickly calculated the gains and losses. After placing a tracking marker on Yan Fong, he shifted his target to Deng Yu and Deng Zhao, intending to intercept them and bring them back to Xiantian sect. Yin Kong laughed, turned his wrist, and grabbed Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. He said, "Stop struggling and come with me." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao only felt a powerful force enveloping them, and they could hardly move. They were so shocked that their beautiful faces turned pale. Li Yundong was hiding in the bushes. Seeing that Yin Kong was about to attack Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, he snorted and wanted to use the Mahamudra Kung Fu to save them. But he was afraid that his true identity would be exposed, so he flicked his finger toward Yin Kong's face. Just as Yin Kong's fingers were about to grab the pair of beautiful sisters, he suddenly felt goosebumps all over his body. He felt a gust of wind blowing directly at his face. He subconsciously lowered his head, and a finger aura swept past his back at lightning speed. It was so painful that it felt like a piece of flesh had been gouged out. Yin Kong knew that this was just a finger chi, but its power was so terrifying. He was so scared that his heart was pounding. He looked in the direction of the finger chi with fear in his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "Is it Celestial Master Zhang? What's the use of sneak attacks? If you have the ability, let's fight face to face." However, when he shouted, there was no movement around him. Yin Kong was shocked and angry. He knew that this person had been lurking around him, but he hadn't noticed it at all. In particular, this sudden finger flick was as powerful as a gun. This kind of cultivation of spiritual power was really shocking, far stronger than his. The more Yin Kong watched, the more scared he became. He didn't dare to stay any longer. He gritted his teeth, looked at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao with hatred and unwillingness, then turned around and quickly chased after Yan Fong. Chapter 965. Seeing Yan Fong escape, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao wanted to chase after her, but they were stopped by Yin Kong. Seeing that Yin Kong was also running away, they didn't dare to chase after him anymore. If the two of them were still in the Sanju formation at this time, or if they still had the art of summoning immortals in their bodies, they would naturally not be afraid of Yin Kong. However, at this time, their cultivation was ranked at the bottom in the Xueqi school, so how could they catch up with a Jinshin master? They would be lucky not to be taken away by him. Seeing that Yin Kong had disappeared in the blink of an eye, Deng Yu and Deng Jiao couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. The pair of sisters looked at the bushes in confusion. Deng Yu said in a clear voice, "Which Qianbei saved us just now? We are very grateful." Deng Jiao also added, "Qianbei, if it's convenient, please come out and meet us. We want to thank you in person." At this time, Zi Yuan said to Li Yundong via voice transmission, "Aren't you going to go out and meet them?" Li Yundong shook his head and wrote on the ground, asking, "You, their savior, don't even want to go out and meet them. Why should I go out? This is the internal affairs of the Xueqi school. It's not convenient for me to intervene. It's better to avoid trouble." The two little girls were talking loudly, but no one appeared. They were very disappointed. Deng Yu was more lively and easily emotional. She said to Deng Jiao dejectedly, "Sister, what should we do now? Master asked us to defeat Li Yundong, but we let him and Zi Yuan go. Leader asked us to atone for our crimes and bring back the Chenkuan Rui mirror. Now we let Yan Fong go and returned empty-handed. We're screwed this time, we're dead for sure." Deng Jiao was also worried. She sighed softly and said, "It's a blessing, not a curse. If it's a curse, we can't avoid it. Let's go back first and tell the leader Xueqi about the situation here. Maybe he will understand." Deng Yu had no other choice but to nod in agreement. The two of them turned around and went down the mountain along the original path. Li Yundong heard it clearly in the bushes. His heart sank and he thought to himself, "Sure enough, the matter between me and Zi Yuan has implicated Deng Yu and Deng Jiao. I can't just leave like this. I have to find a way to help them get through this crisis." Seeing him frown, Zi Yuan knew what he was worried about, so she said, "Are you worried that Deng Yu and Deng Jiao will be punished by Celestial Master Zhang?" Li Yundong nodded, sighed, and said, "I really shouldn't have dragged both of them into the water. If I hadn't done so, I wouldn't have been able to break through the Sanju formation. The power of the formation is too strong. Even a golden immortal can't resist it." Zi Yuan said softly, "Then how do you want to help them?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "Why don't I take them both with me? I don't think the Xueqi school will turn against me because of them. Will they?" Without thinking about it, Zi Yuan immediately shook her head and said, "How do you know that they are willing to leave the Xueqi school?" Didn't you see that the two of them already have a deep sense of identity and belonging to the Xueqi school before? Even if they are willing to leave, have you ever thought about how much trouble you will cause for yourself and the Xueqi school by doing this? Li Yundong thought for a moment, sighed, and said, before I cultivated, I thought that the immortals in heaven were all powerful, and they could do whatever they wanted. Now that I have reached the peak of cultivation, I know that it is not the case at all. Zi Yuan pursed her lips into a smile and said, the way of heaven is reincarnation, and everything has its cause and effect. This world is like a huge net, and everyone is caught in it. No matter how powerful a person is, it is impossible for him to act unscrupulously, from ancient times to modern times, in China and abroad. King Xerxes of Persia, known as the King of Kings and the God of Gods, thought that he stood at the peak of the world and looked down on all living beings. Therefore, regardless of the opposition of his ministers, he went on an expedition to Greece. Although he conquered nearly 100 countries along the way and finally looted Athens, he was then defeated in the Battle of Salami and was killed. Emperor Qin unified China and thought that he had collected all the metals in the world and destroyed all the resistance forces. No one could resist him anymore, so he acted violently and cruelly. As a result, the powerful Qin dynasty came to an end. In the early days of Emperor Yang of the Sui dynasty, he was wise and skillful in both literature and martial arts. But later, he was headstrong and self-opinionated. He went on expeditions to Korea 3 times and suppressed the aristocratic families at home, causing the officials to be alienated. In the end, the powerful Sui dynasty also came to an end. Zi Yuan said in a soft voice, the emperor, who represents the supreme power and status in the human world, is like this. The same is true in the heaven realm. Even the Jade Emperor, who is known as the God of Gods, can't do whatever he wants. Think about it. Traveling monk's son, who made a mess in the heaven palace, was also suppressed under the 5 Elements mountain for 500 years. Li Yundong laughed and said, you're right. I'll listen to you. But how do you think I should help Deng Yu and Deng Jiao? Zi Yuan thought for a moment and said seriously, find Zhang Tianxue directly and reason with him face to face. Li Yundong clapped his hands and praised. Well, get straight to the point. I'll go now. Are you coming with me? Zi Yuan shook her head but didn't say anything. She just stared at Li Yundong with a helpless look in her eyes. Li Yundong knew that although Zi Yuan had been repeatedly suppressed by the Xueqi school, she had a deep sense of identity with the Linggong sect. The Linggong sect was a branch of the Xueqi school, just like the Chuanjin dragon sect was a branch of the Chuanjin sect. It was impossible for Du Fei and the others to betray the Chuanjin sect and become enemies with it. Li Yundong didn't force her. He said to Zi Yuan, then will you wait for me here? After what had happened to Yan Feng, Yin Kong, Deng Yu, and Deng Jiao, Zi Yuan's previous tangled thoughts had been diluted a lot. She nodded subconsciously. Li Yundong laughed and said to Zi Yuan, then wait for me. I'll be back in a minute. Zi Yuan watched Li Yundong leave quickly. For a moment, she was lost in thought. After a long time, she sighed softly and sat down gently beside the Fengchen stone. After Li Yundong went down the mountain, he quickly headed for the main peak of Mount Longhu. He didn't stop all the way and went straight to the cave where Zhang Tianxue was cultivating in seclusion. As soon as he arrived at the door of the cave, he saw Deng Yu and Deng Jiao kneeling at the door of the stone cave, looking depressed. Deng Yu didn't know that Li Yundong had returned. She whispered to her sister, it's over. Sister, it's terrible this time. Xueqi doesn't care about us at all. When are we going to kneel here? Deng Jiao scolded in a low voice. Well, stop talking. Of course, Xueqi won't be happy with your attitude. Deng Yu pouted and muttered in a low voice. He won't lock us up for 10 years like Xueqi Wang Yuanshan did, will he? Who can stand that? Deng Jiao turned her head and glared at her. She was about to speak when she suddenly heard Zhang Tianxue's voice coming through the thick stone wall of the cave. There are distinguished guests visiting. Deng Yu, Deng Jiao, why don't you welcome them on my behalf? Deng Yu and Deng Jiao were stunned. They subconsciously turned their heads and saw that Li Yundong was standing not far behind them. They were both delighted at the same time and subconsciously got up to call Li Yundong's name. But as soon as they opened their mouths, they found that something was wrong. Deng Jiao blurted out, Li Yundong, why are you back again? Deng Yu clapped her hands and said with a smile, well, Li Yundong, you are really a good person. Did you come back to save us? Li Yundong nodded to them with a smile, then formed a palm with one hand and bowed in the direction of Zhang Tianchu's voice, saying, "Zhenren Zhang, we meet again." Zhang Tianchu's voice was not as angry and annoyed as Li Yundong had imagined. Instead, he smiled calmly and said, "It's an honor for Mount Longhu to come here, Li Yundong. Please sit down." Li Yundong didn't stand on ceremony. He sat down on a rock that was half the height of a man and said, "Zhenren Zhang, I came here for." Zhang Tianchu interrupted him before he could finish. "Zhenren Li, I know why you are here and what your purpose is. Do you want me to let Deng Yu and Deng Jiao go? Okay, but I have a request." Li Yundong remained calm and said, "What request?" Celestial Master Zhang smiled and said, "How about having a match with me?" Li Yundong was shocked. Although his cultivation quotient had reached the peak, and he had shocked all the heroes in the battle again and again, he was already the best in the world. Zhang Tianchu's reputation was too resounding. For thousands of years, although the leaders of the Xueqi school of Mount Longhu had rarely fought with others, as long as they took the initiative to fight, they were almost invincible. Their winning rate was terrifyingly high. Only when Zhang Tianchu had passed by the Soaring Cloud Taoist Temple in Zhejiang Province and fought with the Taoist priest, did he lose. Even today, the Soaring Cloud Taoist Temple, one of the 3 famous Taoist temples in Jiangnan, still had sword marks left by Zhang Tianchu's sword after he had lost the battle. It was also because of this example that the previous leaders of the Xueqi school had been greatly touched and taught a lesson. From then on, the leader of the Xueqi school had almost never fought with others easily. He had cultivated the cowardice formula to perfection and had reached the peak. Even if the followers of the Shantian sect had forced their way to the gate of the Xueqi school, even if the mystical silver fox had almost destroyed the cultivation world, Zhang Tianchu was still calm and did not make a move. Li Yundong knew that he would never be able to have such patience. However, he was familiar with the classics of Buddhism and Taoism, and knew what kind of karma Xueqi school and many Taoist sects had suffered in the past 100 years. Therefore, he could more or less understand the mentality of the leader of the Xueqi school and the overall situation. Li Yundong thought to himself, "Zhang Tianchu actually took the initiative to invite me to fight. Has he also broken through the 9th Thunder Tribulation and approached the Golden Immortal Realm? Otherwise, how could he dare to make a move so easily?" Li Yundong's invincible reputation had been achieved by himself in the past year, but the prestige of Zhang Tianchu of the Xueqi school had been accumulated for more than 1,900 years. Although Li Yundong was skilled and bold, in the face of Zhang Tianchu's prestige, he couldn't help but feel a heavy pressure for a moment, and his heart was a little heavy. Li Yundong took a deep breath, narrowed his eyes, and said firmly, "Well, if you want to fight, I'll fight. I just don't know how you want to fight. Taoist Zhang?" Celestial Master Zhang chuckled and said, "The great battle of the heavenly law of the cultivation world has just ended. If we continue to fight, I'm afraid it's not a good thing. Why don't we play a game of chess with the sky as our chessboard?" Li Yundong raised his eyebrows and asked, "Oh? How do you play a game of chess with the sky as your chessboard?" Chapter 965. Celestial Master Zhang's challenge text updates fastest. At Chapter 966. The Battle of Tianyuan. Li Yundong knew himself very well. He had gone to college, but in fact, he hadn't learned anything except cultivation knowledge and kung fu. It could be said that he had basically wasted several years in college. His time and energy had been devoted to games and Japanese action stars. Although he had stayed in the spirit space of the Burning Thumb Pot for many years and had read some chess records, when it came to playing Go, he really didn't dare to say that he was a master. When he heard that Zhang Tianchu wanted to play Go with him, he was a little uncertain and complained in his heart. However, he didn't show it on his face, and there was no sign of him admitting defeat. He asked Zhang Tianchu how to play with the sky as the chessboard, but in fact, he was quickly calculating the odds of winning in his heart. Li Yundong knew that such a battle could be regarded as a civil battle, not a physical battle. Although the civil battle was not as earth-shattering as the physical battle, nor was it as dangerous and unpredictable as the physical battle. In fact, the civil battle was more likely to be an upset, because the rules of the civil battle were the most difficult to grasp. Moreover, whoever set the question of the civil battle would basically win more than half of the battle. This was just like the PK between Sanda and Muay Thai in China. Although neither side was convinced by the other, the first thing to compete in the PK was not the martial arts, but the rules of the game. Whoever could compete for the rules of the game would basically be the winner. Because no matter how powerful a Muay Thai master was, if he played according to the rules of Sonda, the result would be one word: loss. No matter how powerful a Sonda master was, if he played according to the rules of Muay Thai, the result would be the same: loss. This iron law had been verified many times in the fighting competition between China and Thailand. Whether it was fighting or fighting, Li Yundong was a master at the level of a great grandmaster. Naturally, he knew that when the strength of the two sides was close, whoever proposed the method and rules of the fight first would win more than half of the battle. Although he was a golden immortal master, the reason why the civil battle was an upset was that there were many rules and regulations in the civil battle, which could minimize the strength gap between the two sides. Li Yundong secretly admired Zhang Tianchu's good plan, but he had to accept it. Zhang Tianchu had expected that although Li Yundong knew that his chances of winning were extremely low, he would definitely not give in. He said to Li Yundong in a clear voice, "Zhenren Li, look up." Li Yundong looked up and saw that the sky above Mount Longhu was covered with clouds. Lines slowly appeared in the clouds, dividing the clouds into pieces and turning them into a huge chessboard. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately understood. He knew that Celestial Master Zhang wanted to play a game of chess in the sky with the sky as the chessboard and the clouds as the chess pieces. Such a battle of words not only required an extremely strong cultivation of Dharma power, but also required a profound foundation in Go. For a cultivator, it was impossible to be able to play chess on the ground while the chess pieces were in the clouds unless they were a great grandmaster who was one with heaven and man and was well versed in both the pen and the sword. Li Yundong took a deep breath. After a little hesitation, he simply agreed and said, "Okay, but who will go first?" Celestial Master Zhang laughed and said, "Zhenren Li, I'm old and I'm an old man. My cultivation is not as good as yours. Why don't you let me go first?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly in his heart. This Celestial Master Zhang is really cunning. He actually lowered himself and admitted in front of his disciple that his cultivation was not as good as mine. How can I refute this? If a person's status was too high and his reputation was too great, sometimes it was not a good thing. Li Yundong had originally thought that since Celestial Master Zhang had proposed the rules and regulations of the battle, he would definitely let him have the first move. However, he hadn't expected that Celestial Master Zhang would be so shameless as to take the first move. He was really shameless to a certain extent. Ordinary people were far from being able to match him. At least he himself was ashamed of his inferiority. Li Yundong's eyes widened and he cried out involuntarily, "Zhenren Zhang, you won't even let me have the first move?" Celestial Master Zhang didn't seem to hear the hint of sarcasm hidden in Li Yundong's words. He said with a smile, "The guest follows the host. Zhenren Li is a guest, so of course you have to follow me, the host of the East Road. What do you think?" "Well, you can even say such words in such a dignified manner." Li Yundong cursed in his heart. "I was careless, really careless. As the leader of the Zhengyi school, Celestial Master Zhang is such a rascal. How can I win?" Li Yundong thought for a while and soon came up with an idea in his heart. He sighed and said, "Since Zhenren Zhang has said so, please go first." Celestial Master Zhang's spirit was lifted and he said, "Okay, then I won't stand on ceremony." As he said this, Li Yundong looked up and saw a white light rushing into the sky from the cave abode. With a swoosh, it pierced through the clouds and pierced a hole in the center of the chessboard, just like a black chess piece in the middle of the chessboard. When Li Yundong saw where the black chess piece was, he immediately gasped in shock and said in his heart, "No way. The first move of Tianyuan? Is Celestial Master Zhang crazy?" There was a saying in Go called golden horn and silver edge grass belly, which meant that on the chessboard, the four corners were the most valuable, followed by the place near the border, the middle, and the last one was the Tianyuan position in the middle. Since ancient times, Go had been like the art of war. Although the Central Plains was a rich and prosperous place, it was also a place that military masters had to fight for and fight for. Moreover, it was empty all around, with no one to rely on. There were flaws everywhere, and there was no danger to defend. Unlike the corners, where at least two sides could not be attacked, and the silver edge had one side to rely on. Only the middle could be attacked from all directions. It could be said that it could not be defended or attacked at all. If someone played Tianyuan first in Go, there were only two possibilities. The first possibility was that he was a peerless genius, and the second possibility was that he didn't know how to play Go at all. Although Li Yundong was not a national player of Go, He also knew that Wu Qingyuan, the strongest national player of Go in the history of Go, had never played Go like this. Wu Qingyuan was born in Fuzhou, Fujian province. At the age of 11, he went to Duan Qirui's mansion to support his family with Go skills. At the age of 13, his Go skills reached the peak, and he was invincible in China. Because the peak of Go in the world was in Japan at that time, Wu Qingyuan went east to Japan at the age of 14 and began his career as a professional Go player. At the age of 19, Wu Qingyuan challenged the #1 national player of Japan, Haninjo Hidia. For the next 20 years, Wu Qingyuan dominated the Japanese Go world, sweeping thousands of troops and never meeting an opponent. In particular, during the period when Japan's military government invaded China, Wu Qingyuan single-handedly launched an unprecedented 10 battles, defeating 7 of Japan's top Go players one after another and defeating all of them until they were demoted. Even the defeated Japanese had no choice but to respectfully call Wu Qingyuan Showa chess saint when they saw him. Such an unprecedented Go master had never played Tianyuan in the first game, but Zhang Tianshi, the leader of the Xueqi school of Mount Longhu, had played Tianyuan in the first game. This was either a provocation, a deliberate humiliation because his Go skills were far better than Li Yundong's, or Zhang Tianshi didn't know how to play Go at all. But the problem was that Zhang Tianshi, who had always been patient and cultivated the cowardly formula, had taken the initiative to challenge Li Yundong. How could he not know Go? Was he kidding? As soon as Zhang Tianshi played Tianyuan in the first game, Li Yundong felt an unparalleled arrogance. It seemed to be the arrogance and disdain of the Xueqi school of Mount Longhu that had been passed down for thousands of years. If he didn't have absolute confidence, he wouldn't have taken this step. Although Li Yundong didn't think that his Go skills were good, he was not a rookie who could be trampled on. Seeing that Zhang Tianshi was so arrogant, he couldn't help but be shocked and angry. After taking a deep breath, although he was angry in his heart, he suppressed it and calmed down to think of countermeasures. Zhang Tianshi's first move was Tianyuan, which was equivalent to waving his sword and going straight to the zhonggong in the first move. He drew his sword and provoked Li Yundong with extraordinary momentum and amazing boldness. At this time, Li Yundong had to face 2 choices. The first was to bear it and honestly occupy the corner, lay out the 3x3 position or the star position. The corner would be thick and the power would be strong. At that time, when he fought with Zhang Tianshi's chess pieces in the middle game, his chances of winning would be greatly increased. But this also had a weakness. Li Yundong would be inferior in momentum. Most of the time, whether it was Go fighting or fighting, it was all about momentum. Once his momentum was lost, he would basically lose more than half of it. The 3 armies could seize the commander, but an ordinary man could not. Therefore, Li Yundong had another way to deal with it, which was to face Zhang Tianshi's aggressive challenge and fight head-on with his sword. Li Yundong was also a proud person. After thinking for a while, he raised his hand and waved his finger in the sky. He drew a circle in the air with his fingertip and drew a white chess piece in the cloud chessboard. The white chess piece was placed in the lower right corner. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao didn't know how to play Go, so they just looked up at the sky blankly. However, some of the other disciples of the Xueqi school in Mount Longhu also noticed this scene. They all looked up in surprise, pointed at the sky, and whispered to each other. Zi Yuan, who was waiting at the side peak, also noticed that something was wrong. She looked up and was shocked. At this time, Li Yundong and Zhang Tianshi did not give in to each other. Faced with Li Yundong's aggressive move, Zhang Tianshi did not hesitate to break it. The 2 chess pieces were entangled together at the beginning of the game, forming a murderous momentum. Although the chess game in the sky was not as fierce and thrilling as the battle between the 2 of them, it was still thrilling. Zi Yuan saw that Li Yundong and Zhang Tianshi were fighting each other, refusing to give in to each other. The black pieces and the white pieces were close to each other, and soon they formed the most thrilling and unpredictable mega avalanche posture in Go. Zi Yuan was shocked and thought to herself, I once heard from my master that Zhang Tianshi is proficient in zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting. His Go skills are even more extraordinary. Although Li Yundong is good at fighting, Go is not his strong point. He is fighting with Zhang Tianshi in close combat and playing the mega avalanche posture. He is really courting death. No, I have to go and help him. Otherwise, he will definitely lose. Thinking of this, Zi Yuan's figure flashed and quickly rushed toward the main peak of Mount Longhu. Chapter 966. The Battle of Tian Yuan. The fastest word update. At. Chapter 967. Zi Yuan ran all the way, looking up at the sky. She saw that Li Yundong and Zhang Tianshi were not giving in to each other. They were fighting back and forth, as if there were tens of thousands of horses galloping on the chessboard and thousands of troops fighting each other. In the sky, except for the clouds on the chessboard, which were as calm as stone carvings, the surrounding clouds were constantly rippling, full of murderous intent. Zi Yuan was extremely fast. She carefully hid her figure and aura all the way. When she was not far from Li Yundong, she couldn't wait to send a voice transmission to him. Li Yundong, jump out quickly. Don't play the Mega Avalanche with him. This Mega Avalanche is full of traps and traps. You can't play it. Li Yundong was shocked when he heard this, but his expression did not change. The most taboo in a game of Go was for someone to speak up. First, it would destroy the player's train of thought. Second, it would destroy the balance of the game. Third, it would involve moral issues. As the saying goes, when watching a game, one should not talk about a true gentleman. Li Yundong thought silently for a while. He raised his hand and waved his fingers. His white piece was still moving toward the black piece. It was still a head-on confrontation. Zi Yuan was stunned, but she soon understood that Li Yundong was using his own actions to tell her that he wanted to rely on his own strength to play this game, and he didn't want Zi Yuan to participate in it. Zi Yuan stood there for a long time, watching Li Yundong and Zhang Tianshi move their pieces quickly. The chessboard quickly became thick. The reason why the Mega Avalanche was terrible was that once the momentum of the avalanche was formed, it was not only a game of chess with killing intent and tricks everywhere, but also a game of chess that would not end until one side died. It was like a snowy landslide on the top of a mountain. At first, the snowball was very small and its power was relatively small, so it could be stopped and cut off. But when the snowball rolled down, it would become bigger and bigger, and its power would become stronger and stronger. In the end, it would become a terrifying force that could swallow everything. Therefore, this kind of contest in Go was called the Mega Avalanche. If Li Yundong had jumped out at the beginning, he might have been able to avoid this kind of endless chess game. However, he chose to face the difficulties head-on, chose to meet them on a narrow road, and drew his sword to fight. This meant that this game of chess was fierce and it was impossible for it to be good. Zi Yuan watched Li Yundong move very quickly, almost without thinking, as if he was playing fast chess in 10 seconds. Although there was nothing wrong with his response, she was still secretly anxious and her heart was burning. She thought, Li Yundong's strength is his profound spiritual power and invincible fighting. Go and fighting are really two different fields. As the saying goes, different professions are different worlds. How can he beat Zhang Tianshi, who has played Go for many years, in Go? If Li Yundong had wanted to drag the other party into the later stage of the official battle from the beginning, he might have been able to turn defeat into victory with his deep and powerful cultivation quotient. But now he was fighting to the death in the early stage. That was really courting death. Zi Yuan knew that Li Yundong and Zhang Tianshi were using the sky as the chessboard and the clouds as the chess pieces. Every move consumed a lot of spiritual power and Xueqi. In addition, the brain had to think intensely. It could be said that it was a double test of a person's essence, qi, and spirit. The longer it dragged on, the more powerful Li Yundong would be, but the shorter it was, the fiercer Zhang Tianshi would be. Li Yundong and Zhang Tianshi had made more than a dozen moves in a row. The momentum of the Mega Avalanche had been completely formed and could not be reversed. At a glance, one could see that the white and black pieces were closely leaning against each other, like a heavy snow landslide on the top of a mountain, extending all the way to the middle. Li Yunyang was also suffering in silence. He had been pushed by Zhang Tianshi to fight with the other party in such an extremely unfavorable situation. When he saw the other party's arrogant first move, he chose to fight hand-to-hand with the other party in a rage. But even if he made a move in anger, Li Yundong's choice was still calm, because he was a master who was not strong in Go. He knew that he was best at close combat in Go. Close combat was also the most dangerous and difficult part of the game. Many Go beginners, intermediate Go players, and most female Go players like to fight in the early game and kill in the middle game. Only the real masters like to look at the overall situation and compete with their opponents in terms of calculation ability and control of the situation. This logic was similar to StarCraft or Warcraft in esports games. Most beginners and middle-tier players like to use their ultimate skills. They would use all sorts of ultimate skills to scare their opponents and make them break out in a cold sweat. However, true top-tier experts rarely used their ultimate skills. Most of the time, they would compete with their opponents in the later stages of the game, competing with their operations, and defeating their opponents fair and square. This was because they were extremely confident in their own strength. They believed that they could control everything and defend against all ultimate skills. However, Li Yundong and Zhang Tianxue were fighting. The strange thing was that Li Yundong, a rookie who couldn't be ranked in the middle level of Go, didn't take the initiative to make a big move first, but Zhang Tianxue made a big move first. Although Li Yundong was annoyed, how could he not respond? Could it be that he really wanted to compete with Zhang Tianxue for the back position? That would be really courting death. Although this move consumed a lot of spiritual energy and Xueqi, in Li Yundong's opinion, it was impossible for the dignified leader of the Xueqi school to be unable to finish a game of Go, right? Therefore, Li Yundong had chosen the most chaotic and thrilling way of playing. He had chosen to win in the chaos and danger. In the chaos, perhaps Zhang Tianxue would make a mistake in his calculation, or he would fall into his own trap. These were all possible. Li Yundong looked nervous, and his fingers kept waving in the air. From time to time, in the cave where Zhang Tianxue was located, there were beams of white light shooting up into the sky, piercing through the clouds in the sky. On the side peak, Zhang Kongyun was stroking his beard and looking up at the sky. Zhang Lufang blinked her eyes and kept saying, "Oh master, who is going to win? Tell me, I'm so anxious." Hey, what is the meaning of this move? Why did Li Yundong play in this place? Aya, what does sect leader Martial Uncle mean by this? Master, tell me quickly. Zhang Kongyun saw that she was chattering like a sparrow, and he was not in the mood to enjoy the chess game. He couldn't help but turn around and glare at her, shouting, "What are you chattering about? Just who taught you this, disciple? How did you become like this? You don't have any stability at all." Zhang Lufang made a face at him and said, "How refreshing. Am I not your disciple? Like teacher, like disciple." There was a faint smile on Zhang Kongyun's face and he scolded, "Nonsense. Don't say it. Don't a true gentleman understand that watching chess is silent?" Zhang Lufang grabbed Zhang Kongyun's arm and shook it hard. She said coquettishly, "Oh master, tell me, I don't understand." Zhang Kongyun felt a headache coming on. He smiled bitterly and said, Okay, stop shaking." He pointed to the chessboard in the sky and said, "This avalanche is dangerous and unpredictable. How can it be seen in a short time? If Li Yundong makes a mistake, he may lose the whole game. If Xueqi leader makes a mistake, it is possible that all his efforts will be wasted." Zhang Lufang exclaimed in realization. "Ah, I understand now. I see." But she soon widened her eyes and said, "That's not right, master. It's the same as if you didn't say anything." Zhang Kongyun flicked his finger on Zhang Liufang's forehead and glared at her. "It's good that you know. Don't talk nonsense." Zhang Lufang held her forehead, pouted, and looked resentful. She looked up at the sky and saw chess pieces appearing one after another in the clouds. On the huge chessboard in the sky, each chess piece looked magnificent, charming, and dazzling. At first glance, the game in the sky was really magnificent, and it had the momentum of a tiger. Zhang Lufang muttered to herself, "What does it feel like to play chess in the sky?" She secretly ran the Xueqi in her body and pointed her finger at the sky to release her own Xueqi. However, there was only a soft sound on her finger, and a white light visible to the naked eye sprayed out about 3 or 4 meters away before disappearing. Obviously, the Xueqi could no longer condense and dissipated in the air a few meters away. Zhang Lufang secretly stuck out her tongue. Looking at the huge chessboard in the sky, she couldn't help but be speechless. She thought to herself, "My God, how profound is his cultivation of magic power to be able to draw chess pieces in the sky." Thinking of this, Zhang Lufang couldn't help looking at the chessboard in the sky with a little more awe. Zhang Kongyun seemed to know what she was feeling. At this time, he couldn't help sighing. He touched his chest and praised, "The sky is the chessboard and the clouds are the chess pieces. What a spirit! What a momentum! It's magnificent and magnificent. No matter who wins this game, it will be recorded in the history of our cultivation world. Mount Longhu will have another good story to be recorded in the history of our cultivation world." The two of them stood on the ground, pointing at each other and talking, but Zi Yuan was shocked. She saw that after Li Yundong had made 70 or 80 moves, his speed had obviously slowed down. She cried in her heart that it was not good. She knew Li Yundong very well. She knew that Li Yundong was a person who would become stronger when he met strong opponents. He was soft on the outside but hard on the inside. If he hadn't been in a desperate situation, he would never have reacted like this. At this time, Li Yundong was indeed at the end of his rope. It was not that his cultivation of spiritual energy was not profound, but that the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. If he had Zi Yuan's help, he might have been able to defeat Zhang Tianshi on the chessboard. However, Li Yundong would rather lose openly than win in a despicable way. After putting down 2 more pieces, he couldn't help but look back at Deng Yu and Deng Jiao helplessly. He let out a long sigh and said, "Zhenren Zhang, good trick. I lost." There was a long silence in Zhang Tianshi's cave abode before a voice came out. It was obvious that he was a little tired. "Haha, Zhenren Li, you have to think it through. If you admit defeat, from now on, the name Invincible Li will not live up to its name." Li Yundong raised his eyebrows, smiled slightly, and said, "There is no Bodhi tree, and the mirror is not a platform. There is nothing in the beginning. So where is the dust? What's there to miss about such a false reputation?" Hearing this, Zhang Tianshi was silent for a moment, and then he laughed out loud. "Good. As expected of Tianzuan, there is nothing in the beginning, so where is the dust? Invincible Li deserves to be Invincible Li. He deserves to be a master of both Buddhism and Taoism. With this sentence, he deserves the title of Invincible. If you don't have the heart to win, no one in the world can compete with you. Good, good, good. For this sentence, I have to play a big white." Li Yundong chuckled. Although he had lost, he knew that he had not lost the game. He raised his hand and casually wiped it twice in the air. The huge chessboard in the sky was immediately scattered by him, and the clouds were in chaos. Many cultivators watching the chess game on the peak of Mount Longhu couldn't help but sigh in unison. Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, the 2 sisters who didn't understand chess, saw Li Yundong wipe his hand a few times in front of him, and the clouds in the sky tens of thousands of miles away were wiped away by him. This kind of cultivation shentong was simply shocking and incredible. Although they had seen Li Yundong's shentong several times, they were still shocked and dumbfounded at this time. Li Yundong wiped away the chessboard and said with a smile, "Zhenren Zhang, do you also drink?" Zhang Tianshi smiled and said, "Wine and meat go through the intestines, and the Zhenren Dharma stays in the heart." Li Yundong said with a smile, "Is Zhenren Zhang also a dual cultivator of Buddhism and Taoism?" This sentence was derived from Ji Gong's poem, "Wine and meat go through the intestines, but the Buddha stays in the heart." Li Yundong teased him. Zhang Tianshi said with a smile, "I don't dare to show off in front of the reincarnated Wisdom King." He laughed for a while and then said, "Zhenren Li, although you lost this game, you actually won. Do you know why?" Li Yundong asked back, "Please enlighten me, Zhenren Zhang." Zhang Tianshi said with a smile, "Zhenren Li is not only a great Zhenren, but also a true gentleman. If you ask Zi Yuan to help you play chess, I'm afraid you won't be able to win this game. Do you really think that the outcome of our game is really in the chessboard?" Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he thought to himself, "Sure enough. As the leader of the Zhengyi school, Zhang Tianshi has used shameless means one after another. There must be a reason for it. Now it seems that it is true. It seems that the outcome of this game of chess is in the chessboard, but if I really get entangled in the outcome of the chessboard, even if I win in the end, I'm afraid that in the end, I will still lose and lose without being defeated. Now it seems that I have won without being defeated?" Thinking of this, Li Yundong couldn't help but sigh and say, "Zhenren Zhang is broad-minded and broad-minded. I admire you." Zhang Tianshi laughed and said, "You're flattering me. Since you are a true gentleman, why don't you come into the stone room and meet me?" Li Yundong was slightly shocked. Zhang Tianshi had been in seclusion for 10 years and hadn't seen anyone. Even when the mystical silver fox was making trouble and the cultivation world was about to be destroyed, he hadn't made a move. He could endure the Shen sect's attack. What was the reason for this? Thinking of this, Li Yundong said without hesitation, "That's my wish. I don't dare to invite you." Zhang Tianshi laughed. As soon as he finished laughing, a stone door suddenly cracked open on the wall of the cave. Li Yundong didn't doubt him. He turned his head and nodded to Deng Yu and Deng Jiao with a smile, saying, "Wait for me here. I'll go in and meet your Shu." Deng Yu and Deng Jiao watched Li Yundong stride into the cave, wanting to say something but hesitating. Li Yundong walked into the cave. As soon as he entered the stone cave, the stone door behind him closed automatically. He looked around and saw that the light in the cave was extremely dim. Only 2 or 3 meters deep in the cave, a ray of sunlight leaked down from the top of the cave and shone on Zhang Tianchi. Li Yundong took a closer look and saw that Zhang Tianchi's face was like jade. His eyebrows were as thick as ink, and his eyes were as bright as stars. He was leaning against the wall and sitting on the stone bed, smiling at him slightly. However, under his body, the Taoist robe between his legs was empty. Li Yundong was shocked and thought to himself, "No way, Zhang Tianchi is actually a cripple with his lower body amputated and paralyzed in bed?" Sorry. It's even later. Recently, I've been really too busy. It seems that I haven't written a long chapter of more than 4,000 words for a long time. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.